Chapter 84. Grandmother. As soon as Qin Yining entered the door and saw the house full of women in mourning, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. Reality was so cruel. In just one night, the destruction of the family's property had been done, and the family was separated forever. When Duchess Ding saw Qin Yining, tears welled up in her eyes. "Sister Yi, you're here. Is it okay for you to come here?" "It's okay. I came here very carefully. It's not eye-catching." Qin Yining bowed to his two aunts and cousins, and everyone returned the greeting. When they sat down, they didn't know what to say for a while. Everyone was immersed in grief. Among the men who could think of the tragic death of their family members, someone couldn't help sobbing. This sob was like a wildfire that could start a prairie fire, drawing out people's tears. Qin Yining hugged his sad grandmother and aunt and cried bitterly. Qin Yining cried until his eyes were red and swollen. Duchess Ding wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and said in a hoarse voice, "I've heard the news outside. Some people secretly helped to bury your grandfather and the others. I know this was arranged by you. You didn't stay out of it at the critical moment. You saved your fifth cousin-in-law and eighth cousin-in-law, saved your cousin's flesh and blood, and even saved your grandfather and the others from the fate of dying on the street. I don't know how to thank you, and there's nothing I can take out to thank you." "What are you talking about? We're a family. If I only cared about protecting myself when something like this happened to my family and didn't care about you, what kind of person would I be? What's more, the reason why I have the ability to do something now is all thanks to grandmother's reward. If grandmother hadn't given me the Zhaoyun agency and asked Master Zhong to help me, I wouldn't have been able to do it alone even if I wanted to." Eldest aunt wiped her tears and said, "Sister Yi, don't say that. We all know your character, and we all remember your kindness, but I really can't repay you. Don't say that." Qin Yining waved his hand and said, "Actually, I couldn't have done all this by myself. My father helped me in secret." Then, she lowered her voice and said, "When the emperor copied the Fu, he actually had the intention to take back the Zhaoyun company and run it himself. However, he didn't expect that grandmother had already given it to me. Then you have to be more careful in the future." Duchess Ding wiped her tears with her sleeve and rubbed her swollen and painful temples. Without a servant to serve him, Qin Yining stood up and stood beside Duchess Ding. He massaged her with moderate strength and said in a low voice, "Yes, I will pay attention. But now the emperor is almost scared out of his wits by Daeju, and the people are constantly talking and cursing. He has no time to take care of the Zhaoyun agency. But the people in our residence." Qin Yining thought for a moment, then said, "In a moment, maternal grandmother will make a list. In 2 days, the servants in the estate will be sold. I will buy what they should buy. Otherwise, you can't have no servants to serve you. Among the people I know, Bao Mema is the first one I must bring back." Hearing this, Duchess Ding's eyes were filled with tears again. She gently patted the back of Qin Yining's hand. The cousins were also very grateful. They had been to the Jiaofang for less than a night, but they had already seen the dark and miserable side of it. They thought that they would suffer if they lived. For example, first aunt, and third cousin-in-law had even thought of keeping chastity for the Sun family with their deaths. They didn't expect that Qin Yining had rented them out before they made up their minds and acted. In the past, such a family as Duke Ding's mansion didn't care about such a small amount of money. But now, they were penniless. It cost a lot of money to rent them out in the Zhaoyun agency. What's more, Qin Yining didn't intend to let them go out to work. Instead, he wanted to raise them here, and it seemed that there would be a lot of servants. It was not a small expense to raise so many of them. In any case, they felt this sincere feeling and were very grateful. Duchess Ding took Qin Yining's hand and asked her to sit beside her. "I'll go back and carefully discuss with your aunt and your sisters to see who can stay and who can't stay." Qin Yining nodded and said, "I specially brought Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu here. They will stay here to serve us for the next 2 days." Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu immediately came forward and saluted. Qiu Lu was loyal and upright. Bing Tang and Song Lan returned to the family Qin at the beginning because of Duke Ding's mansion. Now, they naturally had an inseparable relationship with Duke Ding's mansion. Duchess Ding held Qin Yining in her arms and stroked her long hair. She had thousands of words of gratitude and emotion, but she couldn't say a word for a while. She thought for a long time, and her eyes gradually became firm, as if she had made up her mind in an instant. Sister Yi, where's your mother? Qin Yining didn't want her grandmother and the others to worry. They were already suffering enough in their hearts, so why should she tell them about the Sun clan and bother them? Even if her grandmother was more considerate, at this time, she was afraid that she would only be physically and mentally exhausted. The womenfolk of this family still counted on her grandmother in the future. She didn't want to add more trouble. When my mother heard the news here, she was too sad and fell ill. She is now recuperating in Xingning Garden. Miss Huaining, Mother Jin, and Cai Ju are all by her side to serve her. My father also invited an imperial physician from the palace. Bing Tang has also seen her. It's just that she was anxious, but it's not a big problem. She will recover in 2 days. At that time, my mother and I will come to pay our respects to you. Hearing this, Duchess Ding fixed her eyes on Qin Yining and nodded slightly after a while. You are a sensible child. Her voice was close to a sigh. Qin Yining knew that Duchess Ding was a smart person. In fact, she knew everything in her heart. However, there were some things that couldn't be said, and some things that were useless to say. It would only increase her sadness. No matter how many schemes she had, they were useless in the face of absolute strength. No matter how many methods she had to have the ability to use them. Qin Yining went to see her 5th cousin-in-law, who was in confinement. The baby in swaddling clothes was sleeping soundly in her mother's arms. Her 5th cousin-in-law was lying on the bed, covered with a thick quilt. Her head was tied with a green ribbon on her forehead. Her long hair was scattered, and her eyes were dull. Tears kept falling from the corners of her eyes, wetting a large part of the pillow. Her cheeks were pale and sunken overnight. Qin Yining was shocked to see her like this. Her 5th cousin-in-law and her 5th cousin had a deep relationship. She was afraid that she was ready to die now. She strode forward and took her 5th cousin-in-law's hand. Sister-in-law, 5th cousin has a message for you. Her 5th cousin-in-law's eyes suddenly widened. Qin Yining said, you just gave birth naturally, and I told 5th cousin and grandfather the news that you and your daughter are safe. 5th cousin cried with joy and said that it was good to have a daughter. A daughter is a mother's little cotton-padded jacket, unlike a son who only makes a mother cry. He said that your daughter will be filial to you. 5th cousin also said that he wants you to live strong and live well with your child. 5th cousin did say something similar. In fact, there was another sentence that was sent by Master Zhong, but she felt that it was not appropriate to say it to her 5th cousin-in-law now. 5th cousin also said, Shuang'er is still young. If there is a suitable one, marry again. Don't be alone for the rest of your life. Chapter 85. The 5th sister-in-law's eyes were wide open. Although she was looking at Qin Yining, her eyes fell on the void. Tears kept pouring out of her eyes, like a spring that would not dry up. Seeing her like this, Duchess Ding slowly stepped forward and slowly sat on the edge of the bed with her hands on her knees. Her voice was vicissitude and calm. Knowing that you gave birth safely, he can go with peace of mind. The dead are gone, and the living have to be stronger. It's easy for them to close their eyes. Do we, the living, have to bear these responsibilities? Sister Shuang, I know that you are a young couple and have a good relationship. Listen to your grandmother. Just think that he is traveling far away. You will finally meet him in the future. Grandmother. The 5th sister-in-law choked with sobs. She held the child with one hand and grabbed Duchess Ding's hand with the other, as if she wanted to crush her fingers. Everyone couldn't help crying again. In the face of such a big disaster, they would either be defeated by setbacks or hold their breath and straighten their backs that had been bent. The words that Duke Ding had told Duchess Ding before he left were still fresh in their minds. And Duchess Ding lived up to her reputation. At the critical moment, she, who was the weakest and the oldest, should be the one crying the most, but she was able to calmly analyze everything and lead the panicked womenfolk to choose the right path. Qin Yining looked at Duchess Ding with admiration, but he felt distressed for her. The only thing she could do was to take good care of her grandmother and the others and not let them eat and wear their clothes. When the tragic end of Duke Ding's family was known to everyone, the credence of Da Ju, which was posted all over the street, swept over again. This time, not only the bulletin boards were conspicuous, but also the streets and alleys had flyers fluttering in the wind. Those who could read could pick up one and read the content on it. Da Ju killed 20,000 captives because of the Yang Emperor's charge. Another 20,000 men were never able to see their parents again. As for the good emperor of the Yang dynasty, he still lived a life of luxury with the demon empress without any worries. In order to beg for the forgiveness of the Da Ju emperor, he even forced the grandson of the Duke of Ding's family to offer up his brain. However, the Da Ju people made a fuss and scolded him. He was so scared that he killed all the men of the Sun family. He didn't even spare the 5-year-old child. After killing them, he immediately went to the Da Ju dynasty and shamelessly begged the emperor of Ju to appease his anger. The emperor was so muddle-headed, lecherous, and cowardly that he didn't hesitate to kill his loyal subjects. Everyone found it difficult to calm down. As the new year approached, Jingdo was completely immersed in grief and anger. Even the common people felt a chill in their hearts when they thought of the rumors from that day, Cao Guozhang's domineering killing in the street, and the emperor's indifference. The Sun clan was even more bitterly disappointed than the commoners. Mother. The Sun clan was wearing a sapphire blue robe, silver jewelry, and a black cloak. As soon as she entered the door, she hugged Duchess Ding's leg and cried, "Mother, Qin Meng, that ungrateful person, he failed me and our family." When Duchess Ding saw her crying daughter, she felt her head buzzing. This daughter of hers was really useless. She only knew how to complain and cry. It was no wonder that she raised a daughter like Qin Huaining. "Get up and talk." Duchess Ding rubbed her forehead. Mother Bao, who had just been redeemed, helped the Sun clan to sit on the embroidered stool. "Madam, don't cry. You have to take care of Madam's health." Such a big thing had happened to her family, but the Sun clan didn't do much for her family. They didn't even come to see her in the past 2 days. They were all busy with Qin Yining. Mother Bao already had a lot of complaints about the Sun clan. The Sun clan sniffled and said with grievance, "Qin Meng wants to take that slut from the Cao family as his concubine. He's going to bring her in today. No matter how I persuade him, it's useless. He even deceived me, saying that the emperor gave Madame Cao to him. Mother, how can he treat me like this? If it weren't for father's promotion, would he be where he is today? Now that something has happened to our family, their family is so ungrateful. It's really disappointing." Duchess Ding raised her eyes and looked at the Sun clan's pale face, blue eyes, and eyes that were swollen like walnuts from crying. She sighed and said, "Sister Han, you're not a child anymore. There are some things that I have taught you a long time ago. You don't want to take it to heart and work hard to manage your life. You only think about your family background. Can you sit on your family's merit book and look down on your husband's family for the rest of your life? I've said this before. Now that the Sun clan has fallen, you have no one to rely on. In the future, when I'm not by your side, you have to use your brain more." The Sun clan's tears burst out again when she heard this. "Mother, why aren't you by my side?" Duchess Ding touched her face and turned to look at Qin Yining. "This time, Sister Yi has helped us a lot. We can't repay her." "Grandmother, don't say that. This is what I should do. I'm also filial to my mother." Qin Yining said seriously. "I know. You're a sensible child. Now I've thought of a place to go and have contacted the appropriate people. Today, I'll start to move. In the future, you should serve your mother well and live a good life in the family Qin. Let's contact each other less." As soon as she finished speaking, the room was so quiet that one could hear the sound of breathing. The Sun clan's daughter said in a panic, "Mother, are you angry with me? I just have no place to vent my grievances, so I came to tell you. I know I shouldn't have. Mother, don't be angry. Don't leave me. It's not directed at you." Duchess Ding sighed and said, "Sister Han, you should trust your husband's words more in the future and listen to Sister Yi's advice more. That Madame Cao must have been given to the son-in-law by the emperor. Her origin is not simple. You have to be careful with her in the future." Don't believe anyone's words easily. If you encounter something, you have to discuss it with Sister Yi before you do it. Sister Yi is a person who understands. The Sun Clan's daughter listened to Duchess Ding's last words. She became even more flustered. Qin Yining had already understood Duchess Ding's meaning. He frowned and said, "Grandmother, you really don't have to worry. I didn't create the rule that Zhao Yunxi rented people from the musical house. It's a rule passed down from my ancestors. I'm willing to take our family here and raise them. This is also the freedom of Zhao Yunxi. How can the emperor extend his hand to us?" "Silly girl," Duchess Ding said, "do you think the emperor is reasonable? If he were reasonable, our family wouldn't be in such a situation. Your father's identity and status are special. It's not appropriate for us to stay. Besides, I have something to do." Speaking of this, Duchess Ding stood up and patted the Sun Clan's head. Then she said to Qin Yining lovingly, "Although you haven't been home for a long time, I can see that you are a smart child. Let's have less contact with each other in the future. It's a blessing for us to live our own lives and die peacefully." Qin Yining frowned when he heard this. Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu, who were serving on the side, all felt that Duchess Ding's words were too cold-blooded. At that time, in order to rescue these women, in order to send the news to the prison of the Ministry of Justice so that the men would not be worried before they died, in order to collect the bodies of the men of the Sun Clan, and in order to help their masters find their loyal servants, she spent more than just money. How much did she worry and how much risk did she take? Chapter 86. Qin Yining understood that such a big thing had happened in Duke Ding's mansion and caused indelible damage to the womenfolk. Sometimes, it was easier to die than to live and bear all the pain. Her grandmother was a woman who had lost everything overnight. She had to brace herself and grit her teeth to live on with these womenfolk who had no idea what to do. The road ahead would be very bumpy and difficult, especially when they still had hatred in their hearts. Although Qin Huayuan acquiesced to her help and didn't take advantage of them to elevate himself, he was still the emperor's favorite minister and the crown prince's grand preceptor. Today, Qin Huayuan was forced to take Madame Cao as his concubine. One day, her marriage might have an inseparable relationship with the royal family. The womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion hated the royal family, and it was inevitable that the Qin family and the royal family were inextricably linked. Their paths were different, and it was useless for her grandmother to say anything. The only thing she could do was to stay away from them. Qin Yining wasn't angry or disappointed. She was just sad about this difficult world. Seeing Qin Yining's expression, Duchess Ding sighed softly and patted her shoulder again to comfort her. In the end, she didn't say anything else. Sun Clan couldn't control her emotions. She covered her face and sobbed. In the past, her eldest and second aunts doted on her youngest aunt and comforted her when they saw her like this. Now, they were drowning in grief and had no time to care about her. Qin Yining pulled Sun Clan's arm and motioned for her to stop crying. Seeing that she really stopped sobbing, she said, "Grandmother said that she had contacted a place to go. Where do you want to go? With such a big family, all the properties of Duke Ding's mansion have been confiscated. You are all womenfolk, and there are no guards to protect you. Where can you settle down?" Seeing that Qin Yining was sincere and didn't have any ill feelings, Duchess Ding couldn't help but smile with relief. "Sister Yi, if you are worried, you can follow us and have a look. This place is not far from here." Qin Yining looked at Duchess Ding's face and couldn't help thinking quickly. It was not far from here and could accommodate so many womenfolk. Moreover, Duchess Ding could bring the womenfolk to live in a place with peace of mind. She suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said in surprise, "You want to go to the Fairy Lady Temple?" Duchess Ding was surprised that she had guessed it so quickly and nodded. Qin Yining and the members of the Sun Clan, along with Mother Jin, Cai Ju, Song Lan, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu, stayed behind to help Duchess Ding's family. During this time, they even took the time to instruct Song Lan to call Master Zhong. They immediately took out 100 taels worth of banknotes and exchanged for a total of 3,000 taels. The mistress and servants sat in 6 large carriages and arrived at the Fairy Lady Temple in the afternoon. A little Daoist nun had seen them from afar and rushed in to report. When the group arrived at the mountain gate, Fairy Liu led a few young Daoist nuns to welcome them. Supreme Tai Tianzuan Du Yi. Old Madam, how are the ladies, grannies, and ladies? I heard that you were planning to seek shelter. I have ordered people to clean up the courtyard for you. Fairy Liu was wearing a greyish-blue Daoist robe and a new green cloak. She looked round and had a shrewd smile on her face. It was unknown if she had gained weight again. Thank you for taking us in, Fairy Liu. Duchess Ding sighed and led the womenfolk into the mountain gate with Fairy Liu. Fairy Liu, you were right about everything back then. Alas, I hope I wasn't right. Fairy Liu also sighed. When she saw Bing Tang, who was looking at her with big watery eyes and dressed up neatly and beautifully, she couldn't help laughing. Oh, it's Jingzhen. Come and let Master have a look. Master. Bing Tang let go of Qin Yining's arm and stepped forward to salute with a smile. Fairy Liu patted Bing Tang's head and said, It seems that you are doing well now. Miss Qin is really a benevolent and righteous person. Qin Yining held the Sun Clan's arm and smiled. You flatter me. I don't deserve it. Fairy Liu looked at the womenfolk behind her who were dressed in white. She then saw two old women supporting a pale-faced young woman. Behind them was a pregnant woman who was holding a baby. She said, The weather is cold. Why don't we let the madams and grannies settle down in their rooms first? All right. Thank you, Fairy Liu. Duchess Ding smiled gratefully. Fairy Liu called two of her disciples over. Take everyone to the side courtyard first. Yes, Master. The two little Daoist nuns bowed and led everyone to the side courtyard on the west side. Fairy Liu led Duchess Ding, the Sun Clan, and Qin Yining to her courtyard. While walking, Fairy Liu kept looking at the pale-faced Sun Clan. Who would have thought that when they arrived at the courtyard gate, they heard a young man complaining, Why were you gone for so long? Master was waiting for you. The two sides walked across each other. Qin Yining and Bing Tang both widened their eyes. The young man in front of them was 17 or 18 years old. He was of medium height and looked strong. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His facial features were very regular. He was wearing a dark blue cotton-padded jacket with a wool jacket and a warm hat. He was also looking at them in surprise. When his eyes landed on Bing Tang, his originally fair face instantly turned red. It was the young man who covered Bing Tang's mouth in the main hall that day. If he was here, then the young man who was called Master by Fairy Liu was also here. Sure enough, when the bamboo curtain in the main room opened, a handsome young man wearing a brocade cloak with a grey fur collar walked out. He was tall, with long eyebrows and phoenix eyes. He had a gentle temperament. It was the young man Qin Yining had met. Qin Yining quickly lowered his eyes. Thinking of the scene that day, he couldn't help but blush with embarrassment. Seeing her blush, Pang Xiao couldn't help but look away awkwardly, although he had been hiding his eyes and slightly hunching his back to change his aura. Fairy Liu's shrewd eyes looked back and forth between their faces. Then she grinned and said, Come on, it's cold outside. Let's talk inside. The path here is narrow, so there's only a charcoal brazier in this room for the time being. Anyway, we've already met, and we're not strangers. Please come in. The guest had to follow the host's wishes. Since Fairy Liu said so, and Duchess Ding and her womenfolk would settle down here in the future, Qin Yining couldn't refuse. He only helped the Sun Clan and Duchess Ding into the room. The room was as warm as spring. Fairy Liu sat at the head of the table and invited everyone to make themselves comfortable. The young master sat at the head of the table on Fairy Liu's left. The strong young man stood behind him. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan sat opposite him. Qin Yining stood behind his grandmother as usual. For the time being, Bing Tang and Mother Jin were sent to the outer room. Chapter 87. The light in Shenggu Liu's eyes grew brighter. As long as she had something to do, she would have a chance to see the money. She had always felt that people should cultivate their own hobbies in life. Some people liked food, some liked beauty, and some liked money. She loved money. If she didn't love anything, it would be boring to live. Miss Qin, please tell me what you need. Qin Yining took out 2,000 taels of silver from his sleeve and stepped forward to give it to Shengu Liu with both hands. He looked at Shengu Liu with a smile and said, "Abidine, you know about my grandfather's family. Today, I would like to trouble you to perform the 49-day rite of forgiveness for the dead. Here is 2,000 taels of silver. I hope you will pay more attention to this matter." "I see." Shengu Liu winked at Qin Yining knowingly. Then she counted the silver in her hand and said, "Miss Qin, you are so generous. Don't worry, I will do my best. The women of Duke Ding's family are cultivating in our temple, so you can rest assured. In that case, I'll leave everything to you." Qin Yining saw that he had achieved his goal, so he smiled and retreated behind Duchess Ding. She could understand that her grandmother wanted to reduce contact with her. It was just that her family was heartbroken. If she didn't spend some money to ask Fairy Liu to take care of them, she wouldn't be able to rest assured. Duchess Ding also understood Qin Yining's intentions. The soft part of her heart was touched. She was moved and took Qin Yining's hand and patted it. The Sun Clan was surprised that Qin Yining had so much money, but the Sun Clan was also happy that their daughter was filial and was willing to help her family. Just as Shengu Liu was counting the silver with a smile, a low magnetic voice suddenly said slowly, "Miss, are you the young lady of Grand Preceptor Qin's family?" Finally, he was willing to talk to her. Huzi looked at his master excitedly. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan were a little surprised. They didn't expect that a man would talk to them. Actually, if he was really a person who strictly adhered to etiquette, he would naturally avoid the conversation when he saw a woman talking. He wouldn't be like this young master who was just watching from the side. However, since they were talking in Fairy Liu's room and Fairy Liu had left this person here, they had to allow him to speak. Qin Yining looked up. Her beautiful eyes only lingered on Pang Xiao's face for a moment before she curtsied. "That's me. This young master has a deep relationship with Master Liu. Now that we have met twice, I still haven't asked for young master's name and where is he from. My surname is Yao. I'm from the north, and I'm here to do business." Pang Xiao stood up and returned the greeting, using his mother's surname. "So it's young Master Yao." Qin Yining lowered his head and didn't say anything else. Pang Xiao also returned to his seat. Because this was the first time he had spoken with Qin Yining, his heart was still throbbing slightly. At this moment, Song Lan came in from the outside and bowed to everyone with a smile. Then she went to Qin Yining and whispered a few words in his ear. Qin Yining's expression didn't change. He nodded to indicate that he understood. Then he whispered a few words in Song Lan's ear and asked her to leave. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan both saw it, but they didn't take it to heart. Fairy Liu chatted with Duchess Ding again. Most of their conversation was just about daily greetings and gossip. Qin Yining joined in the fun, but his attention was obviously not on their conversation. He always subconsciously glanced at the window lattice and the door. Pang Xiao lowered his eyes and didn't say anything, but his attention was on Qin Yining. Seeing her like this, he guessed that something must have happened. He couldn't help but smile with interest. He knew that Qin Yining was a smart woman, so he was looking forward to seeing what she was up to. Duchess Ding saw that it was almost time, so she said with a smile, "It's getting late." Qin Yining held Duchess Ding's shoulder and stopped her. She continued with a smile, "But the Abidine and I hit it off very well. I can't help but want to talk for a while. You don't mind, do you?" Fairy Liu blinked her small eyes. Obviously, she didn't understand how she hit it off with this rich young lady. But she was a rich woman who had given her 4,000 taels of silver. In the future, Duchess Ding would live in the Fairy Lady Temple, and she would be able to get money from her. If there was money to be made, she would naturally do whatever she said. "Of course I don't mind. To be honest, I also hit it off with Miss Qin." "Yes. I think so. I feel close to the Abidine. It can be seen that we are destined to meet each other." Qin Yining rolled her bright eyes and smiled. "Does the Abidine live here for a long time? I just returned to the capital not long ago, and there are many things that I don't know." Duchess Ding felt Qin Yining's white hands pressing on her shoulders slightly. Although she didn't understand why she interrupted her farewell, she cooperated and said, I remember that you have been in the Fairy Lady Temple for 4 or 5 years, right? Fairy Liu nodded with a smile. Yes, I do have a close relationship with the capital. But I have little talent and knowledge. There are many things that I can benefit from, but I haven't done much for the fated person. I'm really ashamed. Qin Yining hurriedly said, the Abbey Dean is too modest. Not to mention other things, the Abbey Dean's ability to make irrefutable judgments is comparable to Tian Jizi. When Qin Yining was wandering among the people, she had long heard that there was a wandering monk in the north of Daeju. He was known as Tian Jizi. Tian Jizi specialized in reading the signs of heaven and breaking the world. A few years ago, he had read the fate of the emperor of Daeju and the 2 famous generals of Daeju who had not yet ascended the throne. It was said that the emperor of Zhuli Chitian, Marquis Dingbeiji Zayu, and Prince Zhongshuan Pang Xiao became sworn brothers. They were the Iron Triangle who rebelled against the tyranny of Northern Ji. These 3 people occupied the 2 stars of 7 Kills and Army Destroyer in the Tian Jizi. One of them was said to be unspeakably noble. Later, when Li Chitian ascended the throne, the unspeakably noble was naturally him. There was even a rumor among the people that Pang Xiao and Ji Zayu were the reincarnations of 7 Kills and Army Destroyer respectively. Qin Yining used Tian Jizi to compare to Fairy Liu. It could be said that he was praising her highly. Although Fairy Liu was smiling on the surface, she was muttering in her heart. Huzi, who was at the side, couldn't help but look at Fairy Liu. Pang Xiao raised her eyes and quietly looked at Qin Yining. Did she mean it or not? Did she say that because she knew Fairy Liu's true identity? Fairy Liu smiled and said, Immeasurable deity, I don't dare to accept Miss Qin's praise. Besides, although I have a little bit of cleverness, I don't have the ability to get rid of disasters for everyone. What's the use of just saying it? Abbey Dean, you're too modest. It's better to nip the problem in the bud than to be unprepared. Qin Yining chatted with Fairy Liu about Taoism, where she used to live when she wasn't in the Fairy Liu temple, and what the local customs were like. After chatting for a while, 2 hours passed unknowingly. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan were a little tired. Speaking of which, they had been sitting in Fairy Liu's room for 4 hours. Their backs were sore. Duchess Ding was about to leave again. But before she could open her mouth, Qin Yining stopped her with a smile. It's rare for me to be free today. What's the harm in chatting for a while? This time, everyone could clearly sense her abnormality. Chapter 88. In fact, Qin Yining was already very surprised that the Sun Clan could keep their composure today and sit with them for 2 hours to listen to Qin Yining, Fairy Liu, and Duchess Ding chat. In the original plan, the first thing she considered was that the Sun Clan was in a hurry to return home. After all, today was the day Concubine Cow was brought into the house. Even if she wanted to show her disdain for Concubine Cow as the mistress of the house, it was enough to leave her hanging for a while. Seeing that the Sun Clan was angry, Qin Yining thought about the situation outside and decided that there was no harm in telling everyone now. Mother, don't be angry or anxious. The reason why I'm stalling for time is that I'm afraid that telling the truth will cause panic. Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Yining with interest. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan's faces changed nervously. Sister Yi, what's going on? Qin Yining's face became solemn. When we went up the mountain just now, I found some suspicious people. What? The Sun Clan exclaimed. Who are they? Duchess Ding held the Sun Clan's hand and patted it. Don't be impatient. Listen to Sister Yi first. Qin Yining said, I've been living in the mountains since I was 8 years old. Because I live alone, I have to be vigilant against wild animals all year round. Therefore, I have developed a very keen sense. When someone looks at me with hostility, I feel my hair stand on end. When we went up the mountain just now, I had this feeling. When I looked around quietly, I found 2 men wearing Daeju's military uniform hiding behind a withered tree in a low place beside the steps. I was worried that there were more than 2 of them. I was also afraid that if I shouted out, we women would be hurt. Therefore, I went up the mountain quietly. Speaking of this, Qin Yining comforted the worried Duchess Ding. I've already asked half of the guards who came with us to guard the side courtyard of my aunt. I left half of them to guard our current courtyard. However, I feel that Aunt and the others are temporarily safe because if these people are really plotting something, anyone who has the intention of kidnapping or assassinating in the fairy temple is gathered in this room. Yes, the Abbey Dean, Duchess Ding, and Grand Preceptor Qin's wife and daughter were all in this room. Compared to the other Taoist nuns and womenfolk with low status, the most valuable ones to kidnap and assassinate were in this room. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan's hair stood on end. Qin Yining only saw 2 of them, but how many of them were there? Moreover, these people were wearing Daju's military uniforms. It was too strange. Sister Yi, are you sure you're not mistaken? This is the capital of the Dian. No matter how bad it is, they shouldn't let people wearing Daju's military uniforms walk around the streets, right? The Sun Clan's voice was slightly shrill because of nervousness. Qin Yining hurriedly signaled the Sun Clan to lower their voice and said, regardless of whether they are real people from Daju or not, and regardless of when they changed into Daju's military uniforms, the important thing is that they came with bad intentions. Duchess Ding's mind had already turned countless twists and turns. Her first guess was that these people were sent by the incapable ruler. Perhaps the incapable ruler had arranged for people to wear Daju's military uniforms and kill the remaining womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion to vent his anger. Then, he would clear his name. Although it seemed absurd, a self-indulgent ruler was capable of doing such absurd things. The room was silent. The Sun Clan trembled with fear. What should we do? What should we do? Mother, what should we do? Duchess Ding frowned unhappily. The Sun Clan's panic was in sharp contrast to Qin Yining's calmness after knowing about it. Can't you be quiet? Isn't everyone here? Fairy Liu also persuaded, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. My room is quite sturdy. It will be fine for a while. Pang Xiao withdrew her cold and disdainful gaze from the Sun Clan and looked at Qin Yining calmly. While admiring her wit and pitying her situation, she had already guessed it in her heart. Since Qin Yining had found it when he went up the mountain, given the distance between Fairy Taoist Temple and Jingju, 4 hours was enough for the reinforcements to come at full speed. Although not everyone could recognize his appearance, what if some of the people Qin Yining found recognized him? There would be more trouble then. The reinforcements would definitely be able to protect the safety of these women because Qin Yining was a smart person and would not put her grandmother and mother in danger. What's more, her little niece, who had just been born, was in the side yard. Thinking of this, Pang Xiao stood up with a pale face and a trembling voice. Why didn't you say so earlier? What are you thinking? Aren't you trying to harm me? He showed off his fear of death vividly. He paced around the ground like an ant on a hot pan. No, we're leaving now. You guys take care of yourselves. After saying that, he pulled Huzi and left. Huzi was stunned by Pang Xiao. Wasn't his Wang Yi interested in Miss Qin? At this time, shouldn't he step forward bravely and make a manly promise, I will definitely protect you, to move Miss Qin? Wang Yi, you just ran away like this. Aren't you afraid of leaving a bad impression? Huzi chased after Pang Xiao with a confused face. Qin Yining narrowed his eyes and chuckled. His laughter was particularly clear in the room. Young Master Yarrow. Don't you think your behavior is very suspicious? Pang Xiao stopped in his tracks and looked at him with admiration. When he turned back, he still looked like he was about to pee his pants. What, you nobles have provoked bad people. Are you not allowing people to escape? I don't have time to waste with you. My family has only one son for 3 generations. Do you still want me to stay and protect you? Let me tell you, that's impossible. I advise you to quickly run for your lives too. Young Master Yarrow, don't joke around. Qin Yining stared at Pang Xiao with her beautiful eyes. The sharp coldness in her bright and beautiful eyes could not be ignored. Although her body was still delicate and soft, her aura did not lose to any adult man. Pang Xiao was almost dazzled by her eyes. Young Master Yarrow, as long as you are a normal person, you would know that it is more dangerous outside than inside, right? I only saw 2 suspicious people. Normal people would think that the other party would have many people surrounding the immortal Lady Temple. Even if you can fly, I'm afraid you can't escape. Unless you brought those people here and you are in a hurry to meet them. Or are you worried that you will reveal your true colors in front of the reinforcements I invited? With every sentence Qin Yining said, she took a step forward until Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan were behind her. Her eyes flashed with a kind of light, like a little beast that did not admit defeat. Even if she was weak, she had to stand up and face the enemy head-on. Pang Xiao's heart beat wildly when he saw this. He almost couldn't resist the desire to directly tie her back and tame her. Seeing that Pang Xiao didn't speak, Qin Yining became even more nervous. She pulled Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan to the door. Because Fairy Liu called Pang Xiao master, she couldn't completely trust Fairy Liu now. As she walked, Qin Yining shouted, "Guards!" As soon as her voice fell, there was a bang in front of the door. 4 tall guards rushed in with sticks in their hands, protecting Qin Yining, the Sun Clan, and Duchess Ding behind them. Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu also rushed in and stood in front of their master. Qin Yining was standing very close to the door, which was the most convenient place to escape. Fairy Liu saw that, slapped her thigh and shouted, "Immeasurable Lord! My mahogany table! Also, my door curtain is adorned with the highest quality green jade. What are you doing? Get out!" At this point, Pang Xiao no longer had the heart to pretend. In front of Qin Yining, he dropped all his acting for the first time. He wasn't an elegant young master, nor was he a knowledgeable rich businessman, nor was he a coward. His slightly hunched back was straightened, and his domineering aura was so strong that it almost suffocated people. His slender eyebrows gave people a sense of sharpness, and his upturned eyes seemed to be able to shoot ice arrows. There was a playful and domineering smile at the corner of his mouth, and he was sizing up Qin Yining without hiding it. Qin Yining's mind reacted with all kinds of nervous signals that only appeared when danger was approaching. It was as if he was facing a tiger or a cheetah. He said in a trembling voice, "It's really you? Who the hell are you? Who am I? Why should I tell you who I am? You. If I want to deal with you, I have thousands of ways. Do I need to do something so embarrassing? Little girl, it's a good thing to be smart, but don't take it for granted." Qin Yining's mind raced, and he secretly estimated whether the 4 guards could beat him and his entourage. This person looks so imposing. Is he a martial artist or not? Unexpectedly, when he was hesitating, he suddenly heard crying and screaming in front of the courtyard door, and then there was the sound of fighting and killing that made people tremble. Qin Yining thought that the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities had come. Unexpectedly, when he looked outside, he saw a group of men wearing Daju's military uniform rushing in with big knives in their hands. They cut down people in sight without mercy. "Oh my God!" The Sun Clan shouted in fear. "No, we can't be trapped in the room." The people in the room couldn't be trusted, and there were so many enemies. Were they going to be caught like turtles in a jar? Qin Yining pulled the Sun Clan and Duchess Ding, called the 4 guards, and ran out, wanting to escape from the side door. Unexpectedly, as soon as he went out, he heard a sharp sound in the air. Qin Yining only felt an unprecedented crisis, and the hair on her back stood up. She subconsciously wanted to hide, but in the next moment, she remembered that the person behind her was her mother. If she hid, what would happen to the person behind her? It was at this moment of hesitation that the men in Daju's military uniform rushed over with bloody knives. She also saw the 2 archers shooting arrows on the courtyard wall. It was too late. Qin Yining was so scared that she closed her eyes tightly. She was afraid that she would die here today. Unexpectedly, she heard a strong wind and saw a shadow in front of her, blocking the sunlight. Her hand was held by a rough and warm hand. Chapter 89. Everything in front of Qin Yining's eyes seemed to be moving in slow motion. Her hand that was held by him felt a steady stream of heat in the winter. She was pulled behind him and hidden behind him. Qin Yining could only see his tall figure in front of her. With his own strength, he isolated all the bloody scenes so that she could only see his back. She couldn't see his face or his extremely fast movements. She could only see the cold light slashing at him again and again, but he used clever and tricky methods to resolve it. He really wasn't a businessman. How could an ordinary businessman have such fierce and handsome martial arts? How could he be so calm and awe-inspiring in the face of danger? Who was he? These assassins showed no mercy to him. Every strike was fatal. They wanted to kill all of them in one fell swoop. If he hadn't blocked in front of her, the guards she brought wouldn't have been a match for them. They might have all died. Qin Yining knew that she had misunderstood him. Even if his identity was a mystery, he wasn't in cahoots with the assassins. Qin Yining protected Duchess Ding and the Sun clan and wanted to retreat into the house, but the assassins had obviously thought of this and blocked the way. Qin Yining could only take a step back and protect them as they retreated to the corner of the wall. Pang Xiao and the 4 guards stood in front of the womenfolk, but he alone had to block more than 20 men, whose martial art skill was not weak. He also had to divert his attention to evade the arrows, and he also had to consider the angle of the arrows. If by any chance he was able to evade, he was afraid that she would be injured behind him. Even if his martial arts were excellent, he was afraid that he would lose sight of her. Huzi. Pang Xiao immediately shouted and glanced at the wall. Huzi immediately understood and gave up protecting the women. He picked up the steel knife he picked up and broke out of the encirclement, trying to take down the 2 archers. Moreover, Pang Xiao had already ascertained the origin of these assassins. At first, he guessed that Emperor Ju wanted to kill him, so he investigated his whereabouts and wanted to kill him in Da Ju's territory. He had his own people wear his military uniform to do the job, so no one would suspect that it was arranged by the people of Da Ju. But when he really fought with them, he discovered that these people's martial arts style was actually the same as the Taytan people who invaded the northern part of Da Ju all year round. Even though these people were dressed like Da Ju, it was hard for him to ignore their tall stature and the smell that only came from living on the grasslands all year round. The Taytan Khan was extremely cunning. He knew that Da Ju was at war with Dian, and the Tiger Army was rushing to the south of Da Ju. They would definitely increase their attacks on the north of Da Ju. Ji Zayu was probably using all his strength to resist the Taytan's invasion and buy time for him to recover Dian. He just didn't expect that these Taytan barbarians would not hesitate to cross Da Ju's border and go deep into Dian's capital in the south to carry out an assassination. Wearing Da Ju's military uniform to do the job, this was a clever tactic to use to confuse people. Pang Xiao's mind was racing, but in reality, only a moment had passed. At this time, Huzi had already killed his way to the wall. He jumped up and swung his knife at an archer. The other archer saw that his comrade was being attacked, but didn't try to help or escape. He seized the opportunity to kill a few people. Seeing that his arrows couldn't hurt Pang Xiao, he aimed at the women who were huddled in the corner and protected. He fired 3 arrows in succession and wanted to move again, but Huzi had already attacked him, forcing him to jump down the wall. As for Qin Yining, when he saw the cold light whistling over again, he only had time to turn around and hug the Sun clan behind him. The Sun clan had already been scared to tears. When she saw the cold light shooting over again, she thought that she was done for, but Qin Yining hugged her tightly and stood in front of her and Duchess Ding. The Sun clan was moved and frightened. She pushed Qin Yining and shouted wildly. Duchess Ding's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. She shouted, "Sister Yi." Pang Xiao saw the 3 cold lights shooting over. At this critical moment, he used all his strength to twist the neck of the assassin in front of him and rushed toward Qin Yining. The arrows were extremely fast. He brandished his sword to cut them, but he could only block 2 of them. He couldn't block the remaining 1 no matter what. At this moment, he didn't have time to think and could only stretch out his arm to block it. Qin Yining only heard the sound of weapons colliding and arrows falling behind him, followed by the muffled sound of a sharp weapon piercing into flesh. Qin Yining looked back in panic and saw the tall man's back. However, the right side of his body was dyed red with blood. The sharp tip of the arrow had pierced through his shoulder and came out from under his shoulder blade. Qin Yining gasped and couldn't help exclaiming, "Young Master Yarrow." She knew that he had saved her again. Pang Xiao looked back at her quickly. He was still in the mood to raise his eyebrows and smile. Without hesitation, he broke the arrow that had pierced through his shoulder and threw it to the ground. Then, he began to fight the assassin again. Blood spilled and dyed half of his clothes red. Qin Yining only looked at him and felt pain for him. However, somewhere in his heart, there was an inexplicable tremor. Qin Yining blinked in panic and shook his head vigorously. He wanted to get rid of that incomparably handsome and wild smile from his mind. Sun Clan member hugged Qin Yining and burst into tears. "Sister Yi, are you okay? Are you okay? You scared me to death." Qin Yining came back to his senses and quickly patted Sun Clan members back to comfort her. Then, he smiled comfortingly at Duchess Ding, who looked nervous and concerned. Duchess Ding nodded with tears in her eyes. More than half of the assassins were killed by Pang Xiao and Huzi. At this moment, another loud roar came from outside. This time, it was the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities that Qin Yining had sent someone to invite. There were only 6 assassins left, and all of them were injured. They were surrounded by the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities. They looked at each other and their bodies shook. Black blood dripped from the corners of their mouths. Then, they fell to the ground with a plop. Pang Xiao covered his shoulder and sneered. They were all Tatan's men of sacrifice. Although they didn't kill him and didn't kill all the important people, they were wearing Daju's military uniform and caused misunderstanding and discord between Daju and Dian. Huzi rushed to Pang Xiao. First, he lifted his clothes and looked at the arrow wound. Then, he glared fiercely at Qin Yining. Femme fatale, she was a big disaster. "Master, are you okay?" Pang Xiao shook his head. "I'm fine." He moved his bloody shoulder. "Yes. It didn't hurt the muscles and bones. It just pierced through the flesh. But Master has lost a lot of blood." At this time, there was a sound of footsteps in front of the courtyard. A man in a black military uniform respectfully led a tall middle-aged man with a beautiful beard into the courtyard. It was Shu Maro, the commander of the 5 cities warden's office of the East City, who led Qin Huayuan in. Qin Huayuan was panting. He first looked at the miserable situation in the courtyard. Then, his eyes fell on Qin Yining and the Sun Clan. Seeing that they were safe and sound, he finally let out a sigh of relief. His pale face improved a little. When Huzi saw Qin Huayuan, he clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 90. Seeing that Qin Huayuan had come, Qin Yining breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, as if he had found his backbone in an instant. Sun Clan quickly walked up to Qin Huayuan with tears streaming down her face. She hugged Qin Huayuan's arm and sobbed like an aggrieved child. "Master, you're here." "Well, I rushed here as soon as I received Lord Shu's message." "Are you all right?" Qin Huayuan straightened Madame Sun's crooked cloak and turned to nod at Duchess Ding. Then, he looked at Qin Yining and saw that her hair was a little messy. Although there were a few bloodstains on her body, she was not injured. Qin Huayuan was completely relieved. Sun Clan sobbed and said, "Fortunately, Sister Yi and young Master Yarrow protected us. If it weren't for young Master Yarrow's help, I'm afraid we would have been." Qin Huayuan followed Sun Clan's gaze and looked at the young man who had been shot in the shoulder and half of his body was stained with blood. This young man was in his early 20s. He was tall and handsome, with slanted eyebrows and deep phoenix eyes. He was an unfathomable person. "Young Master Yarrow, thank you for saving us." Qin Huayuan cupped his hands and saluted. Pang Xiao's left hand, which was hidden behind his back, clenched and loosened. He smiled faintly with a pale face. "You're welcome. Young Master Yarrow, you have an extraordinary bearing and superb martial arts skills. It's really admirable that you were able to withstand the attack of more than 20 assassins with only my daughter's 4 guards." Qin Huayuan smiled elegantly. He was sincerely grateful, but he still had his doubts. Pang Xiao had already regained his scholarly appearance. He covered his wound with his hand, and said with a pale face, "I'm Pang Shong. I was apprenticed to a master when I was a child. Fortunately, my bodyguard is skilled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it alone." Hearing this, Huzi immediately shook his head with a simple and honest smile. "No, no, no. Young Master's martial arts skills are also good." Qin Huayuan sized up Huzi again. He saw that Huzi's face was young and tender, his head was strong, but his eyes were very shrewd. Huzi's acupoints were bulging, and his body was sturdy. At first glance, he could tell that Huzi was a martial artist. Then he looked at this handsome young master. Although he was also tall, his temperament was very scholarly. No wonder he was suspicious. This person appeared in Fairy Temple and saved the lives of his wife and daughter. He had to find out. Qin Huayuan's beautiful lips. Seeing that their conversation had ended, she asked worriedly, "Are the womenfolk in the side courtyard all right?" Duchess Ding also looked nervously. Qin Huayuan turned to look at Shu Maro. Shu Maro said, "Don't worry, Grand Preceptor. I've already checked. The womenfolk in the side courtyard are all right. The assassins didn't go there. However, 3 of the nuns in Fairy Temple died and 2 of the sedan bearers in front of the mountain gate died. Judging from the position of the dead bodies, this group of assassins came straight to this courtyard." As Shu Maro spoke, he looked suspiciously at Duchess Ding and then at Fairy Liu. Duchess Ding was very calm, but she didn't look well. Fairy Liu was still in shock. She was murmuring with her eyes closed. Obviously, she was scared. Shu Mao's suspicious eyes finally fell on Pang Xiao and Huzi. Pang Xiao frowned slightly and covered his shoulder. Huzi scolded in his heart. After scolding Qin Huayuan for being ungrateful, he scolded the Dian for not having a good official. Finally, he scolded Qin Yining for being a femme fatale. They could have left long ago. Why did they have to get involved in this? It's all this femme fatale's fault. Qin Yining saw Shu Mao's eyes and frowned worriedly. She was sure that this person's background was not simple, but he saved her, her mother, and her grandmother's lives today. If he hadn't sacrificed himself to block the arrow for her, she would have been dead. She had always been a person who would repay kindness. Moreover, she had only met this young Master Yarrow twice, so it was understandable that he was unwilling to tell her the truth about his identity. She couldn't erase the fact that he had saved her life just because he wanted to keep his identity a secret. Qin Yining didn't have a good impression of the Dian officials and hated the corrupt Yang dynasty. Of course, she wouldn't help these people to deal with her savior. She quickly calculated in her mind, trying to think of a countermeasure. Pang Xiao's depressed mood suddenly improved when he saw Qin Yining worried about him. He was very observant. Even if he didn't stare at Qin Yining, he could clearly see her frowning and narrowing eyes. How could she be so cute? He couldn't help but want to snatch her back and keep her by his side. This girl was as beautiful as a painting. It would be good to look at her every day. However, Qin Huayuan couldn't escape the responsibility of Pang Zhongzheng's death. In terms of morality, Pang Xiao understood that he couldn't blame Qin Huayuan for this. First, he had to blame the incapable ruler of Northern Ji for his conjecture. Second, they had different standpoints. Qin Huayuan was a citizen of Yang. It was normal for him to deal with the invaders. However, in terms of personal feelings, he still felt awkward when he saw Qin Huayuan. Why was such an interesting girl Qin Huayuan's daughter? Just as the two were thinking about this, Qin Huayuan pulled the Sun Clan's hand and called Qin Yining over. He turned to Shu Maro and said, "Since that's the case, this official will take my family back first." Unexpectedly, Shu Maro strode forward and blocked Qin Huayuan's path. He cupped his hands politely and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin, please wait. Grand Preceptor Qin's family is also a witness to today's matter. This official wants to keep them for questioning." Qin Huayuan said unhappily, "There are also Guzi from Fairy Temple and other people here. There are so many people here. Isn't it enough for official Shu to interrogate?" Shu Maro still had a smile on his face. He bowed respectfully to Qin Huayuan. However, his tone and attitude were very firm. "Please forgive me, Grand Preceptor Qin. This official is just doing his duty. You are the role model of the officials in the imperial court. You won't refuse this official's reasonable request, right? If this spreads, it will be bad for your reputation." Qin Huayuan's expression was gloomy. He frowned and looked at Shu Maro. Shu Maro still had a smile on his face. However, he didn't back down and stood in front of Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining saw everything clearly and understood what was going on. This official Shu was not on the same side as his father. He was most likely one of Cao Guozhang's henchmen. Cao Guozhang's connections in the imperial court were complicated. After many years of management, he had his confidants in all the ministries. Although his father was powerful, He was not as powerful as Cao Guozhong, who had the support of the empress in the palace. Qin Yining didn't want his father to have a conflict with Cao Guozhong's faction because of this matter. Even if he didn't go against Cao Guozhong, it wouldn't be good to make anyone his enemy. Moreover, she wanted to protect her savior. If she stepped forward, this person's identity would be more believable. Even if she suspected him, helping him cover up like this could be considered as paying him back. Qin Yining came forward and bowed. "Father, why don't you take mother back first? There are things at home that you need to do. I will stay here and explain things to official Shu. After a while, I will return to the manor." Qin Huayuan frowned. "You are a girl. Showing your face in public is inappropriate." Qin Yining said, "Father also knows that I am different from ordinary girls. Moreover, I am not alone. Grandmother is here. My business friends and guards are all here." "Business friends?" Qin Huayuan raised his eyebrows in confusion. Qin Yining said, "Yes, it is young Master Yao. Father also knows that I have other businesses under my Zhao Yun agency." Qin Huayuan frowned again and looked at Pang Xiao. He wanted to ask more, but he knew that this was not the time to talk. Who knew how many spies from all walks of life were gathered here? Thinking of this, Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "Be careful." The family still had to carry Madame Cao into the family. He wanted to stay, but the matter over there was more important. They had already wasted so much time. If the matter was blown out of proportion, his plan would change. Moreover, he asked Qin Yining to stay and cooperate with the questioning in front of Xu Mao. Xu Mao didn't dare to touch her in the slightest. Qin Huayuan pulled the Sun Clan's hand and quickly walked away. The Sun Clan's hand was held by Qin Huayuan. They almost forgot about the grievances of taking in a concubine. They even forgot to say goodbye to their mother. Just like that, they happily followed him and left the fairy temple. While Xu Mao brought people to investigate the courtyard, Qin Yining ordered Bing Tang and Qiu Lu, "You two go in first and help young Master Yarrow look at his injuries." He said "you two," but his eyes were looking at Bing Tang. Bing Tang nodded solemnly. "Miss, don't worry. I will go now." Qin Yining said to Pang Xiao, "Young master, don't worry. My servant girl knows some medical skills. Let her bandage young master's wounds to stop the bleeding. Later, we will invite a doctor to take a look." Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining with a smile that wasn't a smile. She didn't nod or refuse. Under his gaze, Qin Yining felt her heart beat faster. Even the hand he had just held was a bit hot. She lowered her long eyelashes in panic. Only then did Pang Xiao let her go. He smiled and said, "Thank you for your trouble." Miss Fairy Liu hurriedly led everyone into the house. "Let's do it here. This poor daoist still has some medicinal herbs that can be used." Pang Xiao and Huzi followed Bing Tang and Qiu Lu into the house. Qin Yining brought along Song Lan to answer some of Xu Mao's questions. Xu Mao only asked about what had happened today. How did Qin Yining find out? How did he send someone to report it? Qin Yining avoided the important and dwelling on the trivial. The more he talked with Xu Mao, the more he didn't like this person. This person looked like a friendly and intelligent person, but he was actually very conceited. Sometimes, before Qin Yining could finish speaking, he would be interrupted by him saying things like I know, or okay, I understand. In the end, Qin Yining simply didn't say anything more. This person had made his own decision. What else could she say? Xu Mao crossed his arms and asked again, "That young Master Yarrow, is he your friend?" "Yes, young Master Yarrow and I have some business dealings." "Business?" Xu Mao's tone was somewhat disdainful. "Miss Qin is a powerful person." Qin Yining naturally saw his disdain. He smiled and said, "Sir, you must be joking. I'm just a girl in the boudoir. How powerful can I be?" Her ambiguous words reminded Xu Mao of the person behind the girl in front of him. She was Qin Huayuan's daughter, the granddaughter of Duke Ding. Although Duke Ding's mansion had fallen, the old officials of Duke Ding's faction were still there. Qin Huayuan was now flourishing. He really couldn't offend this girl. Xu Mao ignored Qin Yining and began to point at the corpses on the ground to solve the case. "I've looked carefully. These people came to assassinate on Dian, But they wore Daju's military uniform. Ha! Do they think the warden's office of the 5 cities is weak? I don't think they're from Daju. Someone immediately agreed flatteringly. Yes, yes, sir, you're right. Chapter 91. Qin Yining looked at Shu Mao's satisfied smile and frowned slightly. It seemed that this person was not only conceited, but also very arbitrary and ignorant. Although Qin Yining had some guesses and ideas about the origins of these people, he was not willing to say a word in front of Shu Mao. Shu Mao had heard enough of his subordinate's flattery and suddenly put away his smug expression. He scolded coldly, "Rice buckets." Qin Yining was startled by his sudden shout. The subordinates around Shu Mao were stunned by the roar. Shu Mao snorted, "You bunch of rice buckets, I was just deliberately tricking you, and you all took it seriously? I was just being sarcastic. Can't you all use your brains?" Everyone hurriedly smiled apologetically. Yes, sir, you're right. Sir, please give us some advice." Shu Mao pointed at the corpses on the ground and said, "These people were wearing Daju's military uniforms. They wanted to give us the impression that Daju people would not brazenly wear Daju's military uniforms to assassinate people. However, I concluded that these people must be Daju's assassins. They used a smoke screen to interfere with our judgment." "I see. Sir is indeed knowledgeable." Everyone echoed and praised like a tide. It was almost impossible to hear what they were praising. In Qin Yining's eyes, everyone's flattering faces were really stupid. Shu Mao felt that this scene was quite useful. He laughed and said, "Then, we can close the case. These are all Daju's spies. They actually dared to assassinate Duchess Ding and Grand Preceptor Qin's wife and daughter. Yes, they must have been sent by that bastard Pang Zhishi from Shihua City. Yes. It must be so. Sir, you solve the case with lightning speed. We admire you. The warden's office of the 5 cities is also fortunate to have Sir Shu in charge. Yes, otherwise we wouldn't know what to do." Qin Yining really couldn't stand these people's flattering faces. The reason why Dian's court was corrupt was because it was gnawed away by this group of vermin. Qin Yining said, "Sir, since you have closed the case, I won't disturb you anymore." Shu Mao seemed to have just remembered that there was someone beside him and immediately waved his hand indifferently. Qin Yining asked Song Lan to send Duchess Ding back to the side courtyard and went into the room. He lowered the warm curtain and closed the door. The smell of blood's blood. He looked at the man's snow-white, blood-stained undergarments, his right arm, and his right arm's arm. A broken arrow had been taken out, and the water in the wooden basin that was steaming white steam was red. Bing Tang tied his sleeves with a bandage. His arms were also stained with blood, and his body was even more so. At this time, she was frowning and stitching the wound layer by layer. Qin Yining felt pain for him, but this person didn't even frown, as if the wound wasn't on his body. Thinking that if it weren't for his help, this bloody hole would have been on her body and she would have lost her life, she felt grateful and guilty to this mysterious young master. "Bing Tang, is young Master Yarrow's injury okay?" Bing Tang didn't answer immediately. She first stitched the last 2 stitches, then frowned and said, "The penetrating wound didn't hurt the muscles and bones, so it won't be a problem if he recuperates well. It's just that young Master Yarrow lost too much blood, and the arrow was smeared with poison." "What?" Qin Yining was shocked. "What kind of poison is it? Is it serious?" Huzi also said anxiously, "What should we do? Is there an antidote for this poison?" He knew that Qin Yining was a big disaster. His master was at odds with Qin Yining. Her father harmed his master's father, and now she harmed him. Pang Xiao said indifferently, "I don't feel anything, just a little dizzy. Isn't it because of the blood loss?" Bing Tang said, "This poison is a kind of poison that paralyzes the brain. If it isn't cured, it will paralyze the person for a long time. It seems that the assassin used this poison because they thought that if the assassination failed, even if it couldn't kill the person immediately, it would take away the person's mobility." Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows, and secretly sneered at the Taitan people's tricks. If it was so troublesome and insidious, it would be better to directly poison him with crane's head red and peacock's gallbladder. Could it be that they wanted to enjoy his miserable death after being paralyzed? Qin Yining frowned with worry. Bing Tang, is there an antidote for this poison? Whatever medicine you want, no matter how much it costs, we'll use it. I'll ask someone to do it immediately. Huzi glared at Qin Yining. At least he said something reasonable. Pang Xiao smiled and looked at her with bright eyes. His deep eyes seemed to be able to speak, as if he was asking Qin Yining, now you don't suspect that I'm in cahoots with the assassin? Qin Yining understood. His face was a little hot, and he blushed and looked away. Bing Tang had applied medicine and bandaged Pang Xiao properly, and said, this poison needs a kind of tricky acupuncture and medicine to detoxify. The antidote is easy to get, but it's a pity that this acupuncture has been lost. This sentence was tantamount to a terrible nightmare for Huzi. He choked on the spot and held Pang Xiao's uninjured hand. Master, what should we do? Master, why are you so stupid? I wish I could take your place. Master, you can't die. Madam Dowager and Madam Dowager are waiting for you to come home. Qin Yining was also sad when Huzi cried. Even if she had doubts about this person, she didn't want him to die. If he died to save her, she would feel guilty for the rest of her life. Qin Yining's eyes were red, but he was still calm. Don't worry, don't worry. I'll find a way to cure you, no matter how long it takes or how much money it costs. I'll definitely cure you. If you're really paralyzed in the end, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. Huzi's teary eyes were wide open. Fairy Liu glanced at Pang Xiao with a smile, and then looked at Qin Yining. Pang Xiao's phoenix-like eyes suddenly lit up. Are you serious? Of course. Qin Yining's eyes were firm. Pang Xiao immediately burst into laughter. When he laughed, it was as if a spring flower had just bloomed. His originally oppressive aura was completely restrained, and his handsome facial features also softened. This made Qin Yining's heart beat rapidly, and she hurriedly lowered her long eyelashes to avoid looking at him. Bing Tang said helplessly, I haven't finished speaking yet. Why didn't you ask me? What? Everyone looked at Bing Tang. Bing Tang pointed at his small nose and snorted, unfortunately, I happen to know that set of acupuncture. Oh my, you little girl, you're deliberately making fun of me. Huzi wiped the tears on her face and stared at Bing Tang with her eyes wide open. Bing Tang snorted, it's your own fault for crying so much. Are you still a man? You stinky girl. Little bean. Potato spirit. Who are you calling a potato spirit? Bing Tang was so angry that her apple face turned red. She put her hands on her hips and stared at Huzi. She was small and short, and she hated it when others poked at her sore spot. Chapter 92. Take responsibility for him? What kind of nonsense was that? Qin Yining's face instantly turned crimson from his words. She glared at him with her large, watery eyes. Young master was injured to save me, so of course I will take responsibility. Miss, why are you in such a hurry to explain? I didn't ask you to take responsibility for anything else. I just said that I'm not the one who will serve someone for the rest of their life. Pang Xiao was overwhelmed by her glare and couldn't help but want to tease her. Qin Yining's face turned even redder. She really found this person annoying. From the time they met until now, he had already changed his appearance too many times. Even if it was the same face, he had the ability to display different auras. Qin Yining didn't even know which one was his true face. Thinking of his profound martial arts, Qin Yining felt that this person was unfathomable. However, even if he was an unfathomable person, his mouth was still too annoying. Qin Yining glared at him again. Pang Xiao held back his laughter and held his shoulder as he painfully said, You really treat my kindness as malice. I saved someone's life, but I'm being disdained in every possible way. You just said that if I became paralyzed, you would serve me for the rest of my life. I'm not paralyzed yet, but you're already giving me that attitude. It's obvious that you weren't sincere just now. You were deliberately trying to coax me. Qin Yining really wanted to leave him alone. He was in such good spirits and had such a bad mouth. It was obvious that he was fine. Bing Tang also snorted. He secretly thought that the master and servant were birds of a feather and spoke the same way. On the other hand, Huzi was shocked by Pang Xiao's appearance. After following his master for so many years, Huzi had seen him many times. There were those who pretended to be rough and threw tantrums, those who were cold and distant, those who were arrogant and domineering, those who had a strong scholarly air, those who were greedy and afraid of death, and those who only cared about money. No matter which side it was, Pang Xiao could wear a different mask and change his aura. He could perfectly act out those appearances and achieve his goal. However, he had never seen his master flirt with a woman from a good family before. Ever since he met this Miss Qin, he had learned a lot. Last time, he had snatched her hairpin and touched her face. Not only that, he had even gone to kill her father. He had peeked at her, and after peeking at her, he had giggled foolishly. Now, he was actually pretending to be pitiful. Was this still his master who was decisive in killing, had a godlike art of war, and was treacherous in his schemes? Bing Tang prepared the silver needles in a huff. Then, he swiftly inserted the needles into Pang Xiao's body. Pang Xiao said, "How long will it take for my injuries to heal? How long does acupuncture and medication take?" "The decoction will take half a month. Acupuncture is a little more troublesome. It requires daily acupuncture, which will also take half a month." Pang Xiao nodded and looked at Qin Yining seriously. "In that case, lend me your maidservant for half a month." Qin Yining frowned and shook his head without hesitation. "That won't do." Bing Tang was different from ordinary maidservants. If he left her side, he was afraid that he would be framed by the demon empress. It was better to keep her under his watch. Pang Xiao frowned again, feeling wronged. How cruel. It seems that women's words can't be trusted. Just now, you said that if I became paralyzed, you would serve me for the rest of my life. Now, you won't even lend me a maidservant who knows medicine. You. Qin Yining was so angry that his face turned red. He bit his lip and said, "Don't worry. Even though I've delayed your time, I'll waive all your expenses at the Cloud Stepping Inn. I'll even send someone to bring Bing Tang to treat your injuries every day until you recover. What do you think?" Pang Xiao's eyes were full of smiles. He pretended to hesitate and said, "This can be considered a solution. However, the Cloud Stepping Inn's expenses aren't that expensive. How can I take advantage of you? Don't worry. That inn is my property. Moreover, you were injured because of me. I should take responsibility." "Oh." Pang Xiao dragged out his voice. "Since Miss wants to take responsibility, then I can only take advantage of you." Qin Yining blinked his long eyelashes. He was stunned for a moment before he understood the double meaning of his words. He was so angry that he wanted to kick him. Pang Xiao didn't seem like an injured person at all. He actually laughed heartily. Bing Tang poked him with a silver needle. "Don't move. Young master, aren't you afraid that your wound will split open again? Was this person made of iron? Did he not feel pain at all?" Pang Xiao was in a good mood and began to bargain again. "I was injured because of you. You're only sending a maidservant back and forth to treat me with acupuncture. Isn't that too perfunctory? Isn't that also waiving your expenses at the Cloud Stepping Inn?" Qin Yining vaguely guessed what he wanted to say. "How is that the same? I don't lack money for food and lodging. If you're willing to come and see me every day and serve me tea, I'll pay you double the amount of money for food and lodging. Is that okay? Do you think I'm lacking money?" Qin Yining's face suddenly burned. If she wasn't worried that his injuries would worsen and he would die from blood loss, she really wanted to give him a few punches. With this thought, Qin Yining was shocked. Although she was young, she had experienced many things. It had become a habit for her to be steady when dealing with matters. There were very few people who had the ability to provoke her to this point. This kind of anger wasn't the kind that could be used to provoke Qin Huaining. This kind of anger couldn't be used to gain victory through scheming. It was purely to vent her anger by punching this fella with a cheap mouth. At this time, Bing Tang had already removed the needles and was beginning to clean up. Qin Yining felt that if she stayed any longer, she would be teased by his words. She immediately called Qiu Lu to order someone to prepare a carriage. She then asked, "Young master, do you want to stay here for the time being, or should I have someone send you to the Cloud Stepping Inn?" "Naturally, you'll have to personally send me there. Did she say that she would personally send him there? Qin Yining pursed his lips and finally sighed helplessly. He said, "All right, then we'll leave in a bit." He then turned to Fairy Liu and said politely, "I'll have to trouble the abbess to take care of my grandmother." Immeasurable deity, this humble Taoist will take care of it. Today, I've caused trouble for the abbess. Although the military office of the 5 cities has intervened, if the abbess has any trouble, you can come to the Qin Manor and send me a message. After all, because of this assassination, not only did they lose 2 sedan bearers, but they also lost 3 aunts. The families of the sedan bearers naturally needed to be compensated. These 3 aunts were also innocent people. Qin Yining felt guilty. Fairy Liu opened her mouth. She originally wanted to take the opportunity to ask for more money, but when she saw Pang Xiao looking at her with a smile that wasn't a smile, she swallowed her words back into her stomach. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you, Miss Qin. This humble Taoist understands." Qin Yining said, "Young master, please get ready. I'll go to the side yard and come back later." Without waiting for Pang Xiao to speak, he quickly walked out with Bing Tang. The yard had been cleaned up, but the faint smell of blood in the air destroyed the quietness of this place. The sky was dark and lead-grey clouds hung overhead as if it would snow at any time. Qin Yining didn't dare to think about the terrifying assassination that he had experienced today. He quickly went to the side yard where the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion lived. When he saw Duchess Ding, he pulled her aside and took out a banknote of 1,000 taels of silver from his sleeve. He secretly gave it to her. "Grandmother, this 1,000 taels of silver can be cashed out immediately. You live here with your family, so you have to spend money on food, accommodation, and other necessities. Don't make yourself suffer." Duchess Ding saw the sincerity in Qin Yining's eyes. He didn't get angry at being alienated from her after she recovered. She couldn't help but feel gratified and sad. She sighed and patted the back of Qin Yining's hand, saying, "Grandmother, I won't be polite with you. I'll take the money. When you go back this time, you must take care of your mother. Although your mother sometimes makes mistakes, her sincerity to your father is undeniable. Before you came back, your father took concubines. Every time he took a concubine, she would make a fuss for a long time. This time, the concubine was appointed by the emperor, and her background is so extraordinary. You must be careful." "I know." Qin Yining nodded solemnly and said, "Grandmother, don't worry. I will do my best to protect my mother and take good care of myself. You are a smart and sensible child. Grandmother knows that you have a sense of propriety." Duchess Ding reminded Qin Yining again and then sent her out. Qin Yining looked back at the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion, and her heart ached. In this world, the most unpredictable thing was fate. Who would have thought that such a big duke's mansion would collapse overnight? Who would have thought that a family would be separated forever in the blink of an eye? These people might quarrel with each other, and there might be small misunderstandings between brothers and sisters. She thought that her life was still long. Quarreling would naturally make up, and misunderstandings would naturally be solved. Who would have thought that some regrets would be left behind forever? No one could be sure which would come first, disaster or tomorrow. Qin Yining took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. No matter what, she had to take every step carefully and try her best. She would never let herself have any regrets. When they arrived at the mountain gate, Qin Yining saw a warm sedan going down the mountain. Qin Yining didn't want to sit in the sedan, so she walked with Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, and Song Lan. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, the 2 groups got into their respective carriages. Qin Yining sent them to the cloud stepping in first. When they first arrived, Master Zhong just sent them here and left first. He heard that the 5 cities warden's office had solved a big case of assassination in Daju's mansion. He was worried that something had happened to Qin Yining and was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. Now that he saw her return safely, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Yining told Master Zhong what had happened. Master Zhong looked at Pang Xiao with a respectful expression. "Young Master Yarrow, thank you for saving Miss Dong's life. Miss Dong is the savior of my family. You are also Miss Dong's savior, so you are also my savior." Master Zhong smiled politely and turned to Qin Yining. Miss Dong, don't worry. I will take good care of young Master Yao. That's good. Qin Yining looked at the sky and sighed. I should go back. If I go back any later, I'm afraid I'll get into trouble. Pang Xiao was actually well aware of Qin Yining's family's situation, but it wasn't good to show it. She could only ask seriously, what's the problem? Do you need my help? Qin Yining glanced at her and shook her head. What can I do about the matter of the sky wants to rain, the mother wants to get married? She sighed and then became spirited again. My surname is Qin, fourth in the family. Young master can call me Qin Sai in the future. I haven't asked how I should address you. A girl's name couldn't be casually told to a man. Qin Yining was willing to introduce himself like this because he wanted to make friends with her. Pang Xiao smiled and said, this one is called Dada. Dada Yao? Qin Yining couldn't help but say it out loud. She was stunned. She could tell from this person's smiling eyes that she had been tricked again. She immediately stomped her feet and left. She said angrily, you are so boring. Pang Xiao was amused and laughed. She covered the wound on her shoulder and said loudly, Miss, don't be angry. My courtesy name is Jishi. You can call me Yarrow Jishi. Qin Yining didn't stop walking. She didn't even turn her head, as if she hadn't heard anything. She took the servant girl and got into the carriage and sped away. Pang Xiao stood in place and watched as Qin Yining's carriage gradually drove into the dark streets. Only then did she put away her smile and return to her elegant and cold disguise. I will have to trouble Master Zhong for the next few days. Chapter 93. In the carriage, Qin Yining's face was still red. Whenever she thought of Yarrow Jishi's naughty appearance, she was so angry that the roots of her teeth itched. However, there were still some images lingering in her mind. There was the moment when he suddenly put away his cowardice and domineeringly asked her, Who am I? Why should I tell you? There was the moment when he quickly walked over and grabbed her hand as if he was trying to catch the arrow that was going to pierce her throat. There was the moment when he stood in front of her and blocked her tall back. There was also the moment when his shoulder was pierced by the arrow. He turned around and smiled at her with his eyebrows raised as he broke the arrow's tail. The more she thought about it, the more fear she felt. Even though this person's mouth was bad and he always liked to tease her, it was true that he didn't care about the past and saved their lives. Otherwise, she, her mother, and her grandmother would all have died at the Immortal Lady Temple. Bing Tang, is young Master Yarrow's injury really okay? Bing Tang said, young Master Yarrow's injury is very serious. Even though the arrow pierced through and didn't injure his muscles and bones, he still lost a lot of blood. There is also that poison that numbs the brain. He will be very weak during this period of time. After he recovers, he will need to rest for a while. However, I can guarantee that his life will be fine. Qin Yining finally relaxed a bit and said, let's go back and take a look at the storehouse. I remember that I still have a 70-year-old ginseng. If we can use it, then let's use it. Otherwise, I will always feel bad. Bing Tang smiled and nodded, Miss, don't worry. I am here. Of course I trust you. However, in my life, I have been saved by wild horses and dogs, but the number of times I have been saved by people can be counted on one hand. My foster mother saved me when I was a baby and raised me until I was 8 years old. Unfortunately, before I could repay her kindness, she passed away. Qin Yining's gaze fell on the swaying tassels next to the carriage window. Her eyes gradually moved away. When I was 7 years old, my foster mother was seriously ill, and the family's money was all used up. At that time, we were really desperate, and there was no one to turn to. I had already made up my mind to sell myself as a slave, and no matter what, I had to save my foster mother. That day, a beautiful older brother passed by my house and asked for water. He gave me 10 taels of silver and dozens of coins. Although his tone was very bad, I could see his kindness. This is the second person who saved me. I wanted to repay him, but I couldn't find him. And the third one is young Master Yarrow. Qin Yining smiled and said, although the people I met, such as my father and my grandmother, were all kind to me, they were all my family and were different from outsiders. In the past, I didn't have the ability to repay my foster mother and that beautiful older brother. But now, I can repay this young Master Yao. The prerequisite is that I don't let him suffer from any illness, so it can't be considered as repayment. If anything happens to him in the future, I will do my best. Song Lan and Qiu Lu both smiled and nodded. When it came to repaying kindness, Bing Tang and Song Lan also felt the same. Bing Tang said, "Miss is warm-hearted and knows how to repay kindness. You will definitely be rewarded." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I don't want to be rewarded. I only want to have a clear conscience. Later, we will go back to the storeroom to find medicine and prepare some tonics. Bing Tang, you go see young Master Yarrow tomorrow and bring it to him." "Miss, are you not going tomorrow? I think that young Master Yarrow really wants to see you." Qin Yining's face heated up when she heard this. She shook her head and said, "There is a difference between men and women. Moreover, there is a new concubine at home. I don't know how the situation is." When she thought of this concubine cow who was going to be brought into the family today, Qin Yining felt a headache coming on. Her mother would definitely make a fuss again, and she didn't know how it would end. Moreover, Madame Cow's background was quite big. She had the Emperor as the matchmaker and the Empress as her backing. Although she had never met her, she felt that this person was even more important than the old madam. The carriage returned to Qin Manor. Qin Yining brought Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu quickly to see Xiao Garden. After entering the courtyard, they walked around the screen wall, passed through the hall, and went down the steps. They saw the large red lanterns hanging in the courtyard as if to welcome the new year, illuminating Xiao Garden as bright as day. Bright light came from the windows of the main room, and the shadows of several people were cast on the windows. The light that came through the window frame also cast long shadows on the Sun Clan, Mother Jin, and Cai Ju who were kneeling in the courtyard. Qin Yining quickly walked forward. Before she could get close to the Sun Clan, she heard a burst of cheerful laughter from inside the room. The warmth and liveliness inside the room formed a strong contrast with the Sun Clan's lonely figure kneeling in the courtyard and sobbing. Qin Yining's anger was ignited. "Mother, did the old madam punish you to kneel?" The Sun Clan raised her teary eyes. When she saw Qin Yining, she was like a child who had been wronged and saw her parents. She sobbed, "Sister Yi, you're back. The old madam scolded me, said that I was unvirtuous and jealous, that I couldn't lay eggs, that I wasn't allowed to take in concubines, and that I wasn't willing to receive Madame Cow's tea. I explained, but the old madam didn't listen. Sister Hui also." By the time she finished speaking, the Sun Clan was already sobbing. Qin Yining had long seen through the old madam's snobbishness. She didn't need to ask around to guess what the old madam was thinking. It was nothing more than the collapse of Duke Ding's manor, and there was no need for the Sun Clan to support them. In any case, they couldn't help Qin Huayuan in the imperial court. As for the Cow family, even if they were cursed outside, Grand Preceptor Cow was still the emperor's father-in-law. Even if he had been removed from his official position, he still had many henchmen in the imperial court. His relationships could be said to be intertwined. Qin Huayuan, whose foundation was unstable, couldn't compare to him. But now, Madame Cow had become a concubine bestowed by the emperor to Qin Huayuan. In this world, the most reliable way to bind the relationship between two families was to unite by marriage. In the past, because of the involvement of Prince Ning and Duke Ding's manor, there was hostility between Grand Preceptor Cow and Qin Huayuan. But now, Qin Huayuan had become Grand Preceptor Cow's son-in-law. Not only did Qin Huayuan have a powerful backer, but in Grand Preceptor Cow's eyes, he also had a virtuous son-in-law. The previous matters could be dispelled. In any case, Grand Preceptor Cow's position was given to his son-in-law, and it didn't fall into the hands of an outsider. It was likely that the imperial court had been reshuffled again. From old madam's point of view, what she was thinking about was reasonable. If she didn't take advantage of Madame Cow's marriage to trample on her and her mother in front of her, how could she show her welcome to Madame Cow? However, this method of doing things was too heartless. But this was the reality. Not to mention that her mother had no one to rely on now, she, as the granddaughter of Duke Ding, would also be implicated. "Mother, don't cry. Qin Yining squatted down and wiped the Sun Clan's tears with his sleeve. He held her in his arms, patted her back as if comforting a child, and whispered in her ear, "Mother, remember that we have no one to rely on. Mother, you have to remember that we don't have anyone to rely on now. We have to rely on ourselves for everything. No matter what old madam does, what sister Hui does, or what father chooses, I'm bound to you. I'm your daughter and will always belong to you. I'll protect you. No matter what, I'll accompany you." The Sun Clan helplessly nodded repeatedly. When Mother Jin and Cai Ju heard Qin Yining's words, their tears once again fell like broken beads. At this moment, Mammy Qin happened to be smiling and talking to Ji Xiong as she lifted the curtain and came out. Chapter 94. Mammy Qin, does old madam have any orders? Qin Yining saw that it was Mammy Qin who spoke, so she hurriedly stood up. Mammy Qin led Qin Yining to the corridor at the side and whispered, "Fourth young miss, the new concubine is in the room. Old madam likes her very much. This servant knows that you are a filial girl, but you must know what to do and not be impulsive." The words "don't be impulsive" contained too many profound meanings. Should she not be impulsive and offend the new concubine? Or should she not be impulsive and offend old madam? Or should she not be impulsive and bear a grudge against old madam? Mammy Qin was old madam's right-hand woman. Her intentions were most likely old madam's intentions. Old madam had done such a despicable thing of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Could it be that she still wanted to bully her mother and curry favor with her? Qin Yining's lips curled into a smile, but her eyes gradually turned cold. From the moment old madam learned that Duke Dingwa's men were beheaded, she locked Sun She in the ancestral hall and even shouted that she wanted to divorce her. She had seen through old madam. The eldest daughter-in-law of the Sun Clan was the family Qin's eldest daughter-in-law. She had been friends with old madam for at least 30 years. Normal people would have feelings even if they raised cats and dogs for a long time, let alone people. However, old madam was able to blacken her heart to half a daughter of the Sun Clan. On the other hand, what about her? She and old madam had only met for less than 2 months. If old madam was good to her, then 50% was because of her father's love for her, 30% was because her maternal grandfather was Duke Ding, and the remaining 20% was because of her identity as the imperial preceptor's legitimate daughter. An alliance marriage would definitely be of great use. The remaining 10% was because of the grandmother-granddaughter relationship she had gotten along with during this period of time. Now that Duke Ding's mansion had collapsed, she had lost 30% of her reliance. She would never abandon her mother and switch camps for such an illusory happiness while her mother was being bullied. It was only a matter of time before she fell out with old madam. Now, she could treat it as if the grandmother-granddaughter relationship no longer existed. Then, all that was left for her was her father's love and her identity as the legitimate daughter. As long as her father still liked her, she had a 60% chance of success. She could guarantee that she and her mother would have no worries in the inner courtyard. Qin Yining was a person who became calmer the more difficult problems he encountered. In just a few breaths, he had already sorted out his thoughts. He smiled at Mammy Qin and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Mammy." Mammy Qin looked into Qin Yining's bright eyes. For some reason, she felt a chill in her heart. She was too similar to the young Qin Huayuan. For a moment, Mammy Qin seemed to see the young man, Qin Huayuan, who had once fought with others to protect the old madam. Mammy Qin laughed dryly and said, "It's nothing. Miss, please come in first." "All right." Qin Yining walked side by side with Mammy Qin towards the main room. He asked, "Mammy Qin, where is my father right now?" "Master just went to the outer courtyard study. Father should be very happy to have a new concubine." Mammy Qin could tell that Qin Yining wanted to use her to find out Qin Huayuan's attitude towards this matter. This matter wasn't a secret. Even if she didn't say anything now, Qin Yining would find a way to ask someone else. Mammy Qin wasn't so muddle-headed that she couldn't tell what was important and what was important. She might as well be a good person. She said in a low voice, "Master just sat for a short while before leaving." Then, the old madam questioned First Madam. In other words, Qin Huiyuan didn't know that the Sun Clan was being punished to kneel here. Qin Yining smiled gratefully. Thank you very much. Fourth miss is too polite. The two stood in the corridor. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then called Bing Tang over and whispered a few words in her ear. Bing Tang immediately nodded and said, "Okay, this servant will go right away." Mammy Qin didn't know what Qin Yining had arranged for Bing Tang to do. The young lady ordered the people around her, so she couldn't do anything about it. Thus, she personally lifted the warm curtain and invited Qin Yining into the room. Qin Yining smiled at the Sun Clan comfortingly, then ordered Song Lan and Qiu Lu, "You two, go get 3 thick warm pads and 2 charcoal basins. The old madam is benevolent. Even if she was angry and punished my mother to kneel, she wouldn't let her kneel on the cold stone floor in the cold wind on a cold night. If my mother really got sick from the cold, the old madam would be distressed." Yes. Song Lan and Qiu Lu immediately went to prepare thick warm pads, charcoal basins, cloaks, hand stoves, and other things. Qin Yining's strict gaze swept over the stunned servants of Xiao Garden in the corridor, and she coldly said, "You are all the people who serve the old madam. How can you misinterpret the old madam's orders? If this matter is discussed behind closed doors, everyone will know that you servants don't use your brains. If this matter is spread out, wouldn't the old madam's reputation be ruined by you people?" Mammy Qin secretly admired Qin Yining's wit and boldness. She was intimidated by her and saluted with the other maidservants. This servant knows her mistake. Qin Yining was satisfied. She gave the Sun Clan, who were looking at her with bright eyes full of hope, a reassuring smile, then turned and entered the room. The Sun Clan's room had thick pads, and 2 charcoal basins were placed on the left and right of the front. They also wore thick cloaks and held warm hand stoves. Their bodies were warm, and their hearts were at ease. Mother Jin and Cai Ju were so warm that they almost cried. In their hearts, their trust and worship of Qin Yining rose to another level. Qin Yining didn't avoid people when she spoke, so her words were clearly heard by the people in the room. Old Madam's face turned red from her indirect scolding. Qin Yining entered the room and bypassed the screen with a smile on her face. Her beautiful eyes turned, and she clearly saw the people in the room. Old Madam was wearing a rose-purple brocade robe, and she wore a headband of the same color inlaid with rubies. Her appearance was very festive. Sitting next to Old Madam was a young woman wearing a light pink robe and a phoenix hairpin. Her appearance was very bright. She was born with a pink face and peachy cheeks. She had a jade-like nose and cherry lips. The corners of her lips were slightly raised. Even if she wasn't smiling, she seemed to be smiling. Her almond eyes were full of affection, and her pink face was full of spring. She looked like she was in her early 20s and didn't look like she was in her 30s at all. This was the Empress's older sister, Cao Yuqing. Cao Yuqing didn't look very similar to the Empress in terms of appearance, but her body was exactly the same. Even though Qin Yining was also a woman, she couldn't help but want to take a few more glances at her. While she was sizing up Cao Yuqing also didn't avoid sizing her up. Her eyes were full of amazement. This must be fourth young miss. Such a handsome appearance. Fourth young miss is so similar to Lei Oi when he was young. Cao Yuqing looked like she was in a daze. She shook off Qin Yining, who was holding her arm, and stood up to welcome her. She raised her hand as if she wanted to touch Qin Yining's face, but halfway through, she came back to her senses and pulled her hand back. She took off a pair of mutton fat white jade bracelets from her wrist and presented them to Qin Yining with both hands. "Fourth young miss, please don't dislike it. This is a small token of my appreciation." The beauty smiled, revealing her white teeth and bright eyes. It really made people unable to refuse. Seeing Cao Yuqing being so attentive, Qin Yining's eyes were wide open. Old Madam was also very surprised. She was about to reprimand Qin Yining for not knowing the rules and not saluting, but she swallowed her words back down. Qin Yining looked at Cao Shi with a smile and curtsied, "Greetings concubine mother Cao." Concubine mother's good intentions shouldn't be declined. However, since concubine mother is coming today, I should be the one to prepare a gift for concubine mother. I really shouldn't accept concubine mother's gift. She was the daughter and the true master of this fu. Cao Yuqing was only a small concubine mother. Even if she was bestowed by the emperor, she was still only a concubine. Concubines were only a little higher in status than ordinary maidservants. In front of the furen, she had to call herself servant Kie. What qualifications did a servant have to meet her with the status of an elder? How could she have the face to give her, the Di daughter, a greeting gift? Qin Yining's words were too harsh. Second furen and third furen became nervous. On the side, third furen, seventh furen, and eighth furen all tightly clenched their handkerchiefs. However, Qin Huaining sneered and secretly laughed at Qin Yining for acting recklessly. Old Madam was extremely nervous and berated in a deep voice, "Sister Yi, you're impudent. Quickly kneel down and apologize to concubine Mother Cao." "Kneel? Apologize?" Qin Yining looked at Old Madam in astonishment and said with an innocent face, "Grandmother, granddaughter doesn't know what wrong she did. Why should I apologize? Could it be that the rules that grandmother taught granddaughter a few days ago were all false?" Old Madam choked and didn't have time to speak before Qin Yining continued. Grandmother said that concubines were used for business. In some families, concubines are used to entertain guests. A concubine's status is only a slightly higher level servant. I'm father's Di daughter. Grandmother wants me, a Di daughter, to kowtow and apologize to a servant. Are you sure? When did I say this? Old Madam's face flushed red. She nervously smiled at Cao Yuqing and said, "Yuqing, don't listen to a child's nonsense. Mother absolutely didn't mean to look down on you." Cao Yuqing was stunned. Her beautiful eyes looked at Qin Yining. There were many emotions in her eyes that Qin Yining couldn't understand. Then, she unexpectedly bowed to Qin Yining. "This concubine has overstepped the bounds. This concubine was just too happy to see fourth furen and momentarily forgot myself. Miss, please don't blame me. Concubine Mother Cao doesn't need to be so courteous. From now on, we'll be a family." Qin Yining smiled magnanimously. The room was momentarily quiet. Even the sound of breathing could be heard. Ever since Cao Yuqing married into the family, Old Madam had been flattering her and worshipping her as if she was an ancestor. In order to please her, she even found an excuse to punish the Sun clan by making them kneel. Who would have thought that this savage miss didn't care about anything when she came back and made Cao Yuqing suffer in silence? Cao Yuqing actually meekly and obediently suffered this loss. Second furen and third furen also looked down on Old Madam's actions. The Sun clan's current tragic situation made them feel sad for their kind. Now that they saw Qin Yining standing up for the Sun clan like this, they inexplicably felt refreshed in their heart. Third furen, seventh furen, and eighth furen looked at Qin Yining with worship in their eyes. But in the blink of an eye, their eyes were filled with worry. This was Madame Cao. This was the eldest daughter of Guizhong Cao and Empress Cao's older sister. Qin Yining had such a fiery confrontation. Wasn't he afraid that Cao Yuqing would go back and complain? Old Madam naturally thought of their worries. However, what Old Madam was afraid of wasn't Cao Yuqing going to complain about Qin Yining. She was afraid that this would anger Guizhong Cao and the Empress. Chapter 95. Old Madam's tobacco pipe was made of brass and was very heavy. In her anger, she used all her strength and threw the tobacco pipe straight at Qin Yining's head. If he was hit, his head would definitely bleed. At the very least, his face would be disfigured. Everyone was so scared that they cried out, "Aya!" Who would have thought that Qin Yining waved his hand with all his strength and actually changed the direction of the tobacco pipe, causing it to heavily smash on the multi-treasure pavilion. The brass tobacco pipe and pot just happened to smash on a small glazed ornament. The two items fell to the ground together. The glazed ornament shattered, and the tobacco pipe and jasper holder also fell apart. The sound of the shattering resounded through the sky in the silent courtyard, causing everyone's heart to tremble. The most shocking thing was that Qin Yining's eyes were as fierce as a wolf's when she waved her hand. "Grandmother, do you want to smash your granddaughter to death? Or do you want your granddaughter to be disfigured?" Qin Yining had a smile on his face and looked at Old Madam with shining eyes. His Majesty has always promoted benevolence, and all the subjects imitated him. Every family submits to others with virtue. If you feel that your granddaughter's words are unreasonable, you can use reason to teach your granddaughter. Why do you want to smash your granddaughter's head with such a heavy thing? If you smash me to death, my father will have no children. I'm afraid that the discussions in the imperial court will not be good. Shut up. Quickly kneel down. Old Madam put on a strong front and slapped the low table. Qin Yining hurriedly patted Old Madam's chest to help her breathe. Then, he turned around and angrily rebuked Qin Yining. You're too impudent. How can you speak to grandmother like that? Qin Yining looked at her coldly. Shut up. It's not your turn to criticize me. Qin Yining subconsciously trembled. He was so scared that his face turned deathly pale. His stomach was full of anger and hatred. Under Qin Yining's oppression and intimidation, he couldn't refute. Old Madam repeatedly said, "Rebellion, rebellion, this is a rebellion. Someone come, drag her out for me." Mammy Qin frowned at the side. She expected that the fourth miss was a piece of explosive charcoal. Seeing her biological mother being wronged, how could she let it go? She even dared to humiliate Cow, who had such a big background. She probably wouldn't even put Old Madam in Qin Yining's eyes. Mammy Qin helplessly ordered people to drag Qin Yining out. Qin Yining caught a glimpse of the servant's movements out of the corner of her eye. She sneered and said, "You don't have to do it. I will naturally leave after I've finished speaking." Looking straight at Old Madam, her eyes seemed to be burning with two clusters of flames. I know what Old Madam is thinking. I'm not the only one who knows. Everyone here isn't stupid. But my mother, for this family, even if she didn't make any contributions, she still have hard work. But for this families of my mother, even if she didn't make any contributions. But, of my mother, for this family. Even if she didn't, she over. What would second aunt and third aunt think? SS of mothers. You. Grandmother, I advise you to think twice. Don't be too unsightly. Unfilial daughter. Someone come, beat her out for me. Beat her out. Granddaughter spoke rudely today and offended Old Madam. Grandmother, please punish me. After saying what needed to be said, Qin Yining lifted her skirt and knelt down. Her back was straight, and her pride didn't diminish at all. Although she was asking for forgiveness, everyone could see that she was asking for forgiveness because of the relationship between grandmother and granddaughter. It wasn't because she was convinced by Old Madam. Her appearance, which was full of thorns, made all the women feel that their knowledge had been broadened. They had never seen a woman who was so domineering and hot in the face of bullying. Cao Yuqing looked at Qin Yining from the side. Her eyes were filled with admiration and interest. Old Madam took a deep breath and said loudly, "Someone come, lock the fourth miss in the woodshed. Let her out when she realizes her mistake." The room was silent. Mammy Qin didn't immediately move. She looked at Old Madam, wanting to say something but hesitated. Second Madam and Third Madam looked at each other and also hesitated to speak up for Qin Yining. When Qin Huaining saw that everyone refused to listen to Old Madam's orders, she remembered how Mammy Qin treated Qin Yining in a special way. She couldn't help but become angry and said angrily, "What? Mammy Qin doesn't intend to listen to grandmother's orders?" Mammy Qin was stunned. She lowered her eyes and said, "This servant doesn't dare. Impudent. Do you have the right to speak here?" Old Madam frowned and glared at Qin Huaining in displeasure. Qin Huaining was reprimanded until her face turned red and she lowered her head. Although Old Madam didn't like Qin Yining disobeying her, she still liked Qin Yining's intelligence, courage, and skill. This kind of woman not only had a way of dealing with things, but also had a good face. She had also obtained the Crown Prince's favor. It couldn't be better to use her for a marriage alliance. She wanted to punish her for the sake of her own face. However, compared to her, Old Madam disliked Qin Huaining's fence-sitter appearance even more now. To be honest, when Old Madam calmed down and thought about the way she treated the Sun Clan, she also felt guilty. It was just that the situation was like this, so there was nothing she could do. Qin Yining was willing to do this for the sake of the Sun Clan. It inexplicably made Old Madam recall how Qin Huayuan protected her when she was young. Qin Yining had only returned to the Fu for less than 2 months. Not only did she not have a deep relationship with the Sun Clan, but the Sun Clan also didn't treat Qin Yining well. She could still stay by the Sun Clan's side without abandoning them. But what about Qin Huaining? The Sun Clan doted on her like a pearl and a treasure for 14 years. Now that the Sun Clan had fallen and a new concubine had entered the Fu, Qin Huaining enthusiastically went to the new concubine's side, completely ignoring the kindness of raising her. So many men in Duke Ding's Fu had been beheaded, yet Qin Huaining could still wear bright colors to meet people. Although old Madam's own actions were criticized by others, she didn't like to see Qin Huaining's fawning face. When Cao Yuqing saw this, she smiled and said, "Old Madam, this concubine will overstep the bounds and say something. Now that the weather is cold and the earth is frozen, if fourth young miss is locked in the woodshed and falls ill due to the cold, wouldn't you be the one to feel distressed? As a family, it's inevitable that tongues will clash with teeth. Old Madam is the head of the family, so please forgive fourth young miss, that's right. Mother, please don't bicker with Sister Yi." Second Furen also smiled and persuaded. Old Madam felt much better when someone gave her a way out of this embarrassing situation. She coldly glared at Qin Yining. Just as she was about to speak, she heard a maidservant loudly announce from outside, "Eldest Master is here." As soon as the maidservant finished speaking, she saw Qin Huiyuan quickly walk in wearing a lead grey brocade cloak with a sable collar. His hair was still covered in white frost and was emitting steam. It was obvious that he had just taken a bath and rushed over before his hair was completely dry. Mammy Qin glanced at the door and saw Bing Tang's figure flash by. So fourth young miss had just ordered Bing Tang to call for help. Sure enough, it was a good tactic. As soon as Qin Huiyuan entered, he smiled and bowed to Old Madam. "Mother. Brother Meng, why did you come without drying your hair? Aren't you afraid of falling ill?" When Old Madam saw her beloved son, she seemed to be in pain. She hurriedly called Mammy Qin to bring a towel to help Qin Huiyuan dry his hair. Qin Huiyuan sat on the chair below Old Madam. He smiled and thanked Mammy Qin, who was drying his hair. Then, he said to Old Madam, "Just now, when I was reading 36 strategies in the study, I saw the section about hiding a knife behind a smile. I wanted to discuss it with Sister Yi. As a matter of fact, when I found out that Sister Yi was here with Mother, I couldn't wait and came over." The phrase hiding a knife behind a smile had a deep meaning. Different people had different understandings. No matter what other people thought, Old Madam's face became hot. She uncomfortably snorted. What does a little girl who hasn't studied for a few days know about 36 strategies? Qin Huiyuan smiled and said, "Sister Yi, hiding a knife behind a smile is from 36 strategies. It's from the 10th strategy of the second set. Believe and be at ease. Plot and plot. Be prepared and then act. Don't make changes. Be firm and soft on the outside. Father, daughter knows her mistake." Qin Yining lightly sighed after she finished speaking. Her methods were still too rough. Although it was simple, direct, and useful, after calming down, there might be other ways to deal with today's matter. It was just that she was used to being wronged. Her temperament was like this. That was why she impulsively offended Old Madam. She felt that Old Madam didn't care about her. Whether she did it or not, Old Madam didn't care about her. However, she forgot to consider Qin Huiyuan's feelings of being stuck in the middle. Qin Huiyuan deliberately said the phrase hiding a knife behind a smile. His intention was to stab those who hid a knife behind a smile. Don't think that your actions were very secretive. He was also teaching her to learn how to be firm and soft on the outside. It had to be said that Qin Huiyuan lived up to his reputation as the wise Pan An. He had not been the Grand Chancellor of the Imperial Court for so many years for nothing. While chatting and laughing, he had already stabbed those who needed to be stabbed and advised those who needed to be advised. Seeing that Qin Yining was so enlightened, Qin Huiyuan laughed. "It's very good that you don't need a heavy hammer to sound the drum. Sister Yi, you're a good child. It's just that your temperament is a bit too straightforward. In the future, you need to learn to think thrice before you act." When Qin Huiyuan said that her temperament was a bit too straightforward, he was indirectly admitting that Qin Yining's general direction was correct. It was just that her methods were too straightforward. Lecturing Qin Yining like this was actually complaining about old madam's method. Everyone understood Qin Huayuan's meaning. They all had different thoughts in their minds. Old madam's face turned even redder. She also felt a bit wronged. Who was she doing this for? Yes, many thanks for father's lecturing. Qin Yining immediately kowtowed to old madam in a well-behaved manner. Grandmother, please calm down. Granddaughter is only 14 years old. The amount of rice I've eaten isn't as much as the amount of salt you've eaten. If I offended you, grandmother, please forgive me for father's sake. Old madam choked and snorted. How would I dare to say anything about forgiveness? At this time, Mammy Qin had already dried Qin Huayuan's hair and fixed it into a bun. Qin Huayuan stood up and said with his head bowed, Mother, please calm down. Sister Yi made a mistake because I didn't discipline her properly. Mother, please take into account that Sister Yi has been wandering outside for many years and didn't have good opportunities to cultivate her. She also has suffered so much. Mother, please don't be angry. If you're angry, your son's heart is truly fearful. Qin Huayuan was now the imperial tutor of the crown prince. For him to be so respectful in front of old madam was already giving old madam a way out. It also greatly satisfied old madam's vanity. Old madam sighed and said, Forget it, forget it. Do as you wish. But there is one thing. You can't let her off lightly. I want to see how you deal with her. Yes. Qin Huayuan smiled gratefully. He turned around and said to Qin Yining, So, father will punish you by copying the 36 strategies 30 times. Come to the study the day after tomorrow for me to check. What kind of punishment was this? Everyone was dumbfounded again. Could it be that Qin Huayuan felt that Qin Yining's method of dealing with old madam wasn't strategic enough? Shouldn't he punish his daughter by copying women's commandments, the classic of filial piety, and so on? Chapter 96. Regardless of what outsiders thought, Qin Yining understood that her father was educating her in front of everyone like how he would educate his son. Not only was he giving her face, but he was also supporting her. He was reminding everyone that no matter how many concubines he had, he, Qin Huayuan, only had one daughter. There were no fools present. Naturally, they understood the deep meaning behind Qin Huayuan's actions. When they looked at Qin Yining, their gazes changed. Even the old madam felt a bit regretful that she had used the brass tobacco pipe to hit Qin Yining out of shame and anger. Fortunately, Qin Yining had dodged. If she had really hit him and caused his head to bleed and his face to be disfigured, how would she explain it to Qin Huayuan? As a mother, the old madam was well aware of her son's difficulties. No matter how outstanding Qin Huayuan was, he didn't have a male heir to inherit his legacy. Qin Yining was so similar to Qin Huayuan. She was also very intelligent and bold in her actions. She didn't seem like a girl from the boudoir and had some of the straightforwardness of a boy. It was no wonder that Qin Huayuan liked her and wanted to raise her as his son. The old madam secretly thought that in the future, even if she had to discipline Qin Yining, she would have to hide it from Qin Huayuan. Sister Hui. Qin Huayuan's voice sounded again. Qin Yining, who had lowered her head, suddenly looked towards Qin Huayuan. When she met his gaze, she felt her heart suddenly jump. She hurriedly lowered her eyes and bowed, Father. Qin Huayuan cast a glance at Qin Yining. He didn't like the magenta cloak and the pearls, gold, and jade on her head. Then, he looked at Qin Yining, who had changed into a white cloak and didn't wear any jewelry. Only then did he feel slightly comforted. Sister Hui, you're dressed up quite beautifully today. Qin Yining nervously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She knew that Qin Huayuan was reprimanding her. She hurriedly explained, Father, I don't usually dress like this. It's just that concubine cow came today. For the sake of the family's celebration, I naturally had to dress up well so I didn't feel neglected. Qin Huayuan's gaze finally landed on Cao Yuqing. Ever since he came in, this was the first time he looked at her directly. Cao Yuqing smiled gently, and the joy and attachment in her eyes seemed to be about to materialize and entangle him. However, Qin Huayuan looked away and said, Concubine Cao is from a prestigious family. She's well-educated and reasonable, so why would she care about what you're wearing? Qin Huining's face flushed red from the scolding. It was as if blood was about to drip from her face. She lifted her skirt and knelt down with a plop. Father, please calm down. Daughter was just momentarily distracted. Father, please forgive me. Qin Huayuan said, starting tomorrow, you will reflect on your mistakes behind closed doors in Snow Pear Courtyard. Don't come out until you've copied the classic of filial piety 100 times. Think carefully about what you've done. Although Qin Huayuan was only scolding her, he said those words in front of so many people. It really made Qin Huining feel that her face was about to be slapped swollen. However, her father was the head of the family and had the old madam under control. Even if she had 10 times the courage, she wouldn't dare to disobey him. Qin Huining could only hang her head in grievance and say, yes. Many thanks for father's teachings. You're on your own now. Qin Huayuan smiled and bowed to the old madam. Mother, your son is still waiting to go read books with Sister Yi. I'll take her away first. The old madam could only nod her head. Qin Huayuan put on his cloak and walked to the door. He said faintly, Sister Yi, why aren't you following? Qin Yining respectfully bowed and bid farewell to the old madam, second madam, third madam, and all her sisters. Only then did she quickly follow out. When they reached the corridor, Qin Huayuan looked at the sobbing Sun Clan and Mother Jin and Cai Ju, who were shivering from the cold. He sighed and said, First Madam's body is weak. She hasn't fully recovered from her previous illness. Why aren't you helping your madam up and preparing a carriage to send her back to Xingning Garden to rest? After protecting his daughter, he was now protecting his wife. When the old madam heard this from inside the room, she only pursed her lips and didn't stop him. She sent Mammy Qin out to listen to orders. Mammy Qin immediately responded, yes. She immediately ordered someone to prepare a carriage. Cao Yuqing also followed Qin Huayuan to the corridor. She saw the Sun Clan's pale face from crying and then looked at Qin Huayuan's imposing figure standing with his hands behind his back. She bit her lower lip thoughtfully. When the Sun Clan raised her head, she saw Cao Yuqing, who was dressed up beautifully. She was so beautiful that she felt ashamed of her own inferiority. The Sun Clan's eyes burst with unprecedented resentment. Their family had already investigated clearly. Daju's envoy wanted Sun Yu's brain. The emperor originally had the opportunity to refuse. It was the demon empress who urged the emperor to issue an imperial edict, forcing Sun Yu to die to prove his sincerity. Later, Daju sent out official documents, claiming that they wanted the emperor's life. It was also the demon empress who gave the emperor the idea to destroy the Sun Clan to appease Daju's anger. That was why the Sun Clan had fallen to this state. The Cao clan was the enemy that destroyed the Sun Clan. However, Qin Huayuan wanted to take the Cao clan's daughter as his concubine. Now, she looked like a middle-aged woman, kneeling in the snow and crying. Concubine Cao was dressed up beautifully and stood beside Qin Huayuan with a smile. How could the Sun Clan not be resentful of the new and old grudges? She wanted nothing more than to swallow the Cao clan's flesh and blood. Seeing the Sun Clan's emotional fluctuations, Mother Jin panicked. She covered the Sun Clan's mouth and called out to Cai Ju, quick, help Madam into the carriage. The Sun Clan's tears flowed down Mother Jin's hands. She sobbed and struggled, but she finally lost her strength. She leaned on Mother Jin's shoulder and sobbed. Qin Huayuan looked at the Sun Clan's back. His eyes flashed with helplessness and guilt. He walked down the stairs and said, Sister Yi, follow me. Yes. Qin Yining was already dressed. He held a hand warmer and followed Qin Huayuan with Bing Tang, Autumn Dew, and Song Lan. Cao Yuqing couldn't help but chase after him and called out, Master. Qin Huayuan stopped in his tracks and said without turning his head, Concubine Cao must be tired. Let's settle her down early. He then instructed Mammy Qin, arrange for proper servants to serve Concubine Cao. They must not neglect her. Send the best food, clothes, and necessities. Mammy Qin nodded in surprise. Qin Huayuan meant that he wanted to take good care of Concubine Cao, but he didn't want to touch her. That was true. Everyone in the world knew how the Sun family fell. Qin Huayuan and Ding Guogong and his son-in-law had never quarreled with each other. Just now, he reprimanded Qin Huaining for not wearing mourning clothes and punished her to reflect on her mistakes in seclusion and copy the book of filial piety 100 times. How could he immediately accept concubine Cao now? If there was a woman who couldn't wait to sleep with her after she was brought in, that wouldn't be the Qin Huayuan she had watched grow up. Mammy Qin admired Qin Huayuan's character very much. She also felt that in some aspects, Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan were surprisingly similar. She couldn't help but smile. Cao Yuqing stared blankly at Qin Huayuan as he walked away. The expectation in her eyes faded, and she sighed softly. Mammy Qin deeply understood Madame Dowager's meaning. She respectfully and politely asked Cao Yuqing to sit for a while. Qin Huaining also cheered up. Thinking that she would reflect on her mistakes in seclusion from tomorrow, she smiled and talked to Cao Yuqing. Like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, everyone clustered around Cao Yuqing and entered the room again. They chatted happily. Qin Yining followed Qin Huayuan to the study in the outer courtyard. The father and daughter sat on the left and right of the Arhat bed by the window. The maidservants served hot tea. Qin Huayuan waved his hand and sent them away. Chapter 97. Qin Huayuan said slowly and patiently, "You are my daughter. I naturally understand what you are thinking and feeling indignant right now. You are intelligent and keen, and you can see through many things at a glance. However, you are too impetuous. Once you see through things, you won't forgive them. Everything needs to be separated into right and wrong. I know that when you argue or fight with someone at home, there is basically no one who can stop you. However, what about outside? If you really encounter a martial artist, you only have a little more strength. What can you do to him? Moreover, you are relying on your status as the legitimate daughter. In this family, no one will harm my daughter. However, outside, even if you don't take the initiative to provoke someone, there will be people who will harm you. Sister Yi, don't you think that what I said is reasonable? Father, you are absolutely right. Daughter knows her mistake." Qin Yining lowered her head in shame. Daughter is indeed too serious. Sometimes, when I see some injustice, I can't help but be impulsive. Qin Huayuan smiled. I understand your feelings, but you have to remember that filial piety is the most important virtue. Even if the old madam is wrong in doing things, she is still my mother. If you want to change your mother's situation, I believe that you have more than one way to directly confront her. You can use your powerful methods on Qin Huaining, but using them on the old madam is disrespectful to your elders. Moreover, what can you do even if you win an argument with your elders? In the future, it will be you and your mother who will suffer. Don't you think so? Qin Huayuan spent most of his time in the outer residence. Other than paying respects to the old madam, he rarely stepped into the inner residence. Qin Yining admired him for being able to analyze the people in the inner residence so thoroughly. Father, you are right. Actually, daughter also regrets it. At that time, daughter only thought that since the old madam didn't love me, she would still not love me no matter what I said or did. She would still be cold to my mother and me. Therefore, daughter threw caution to the wind. But in fact, you also have a tactful way. You just couldn't hold back because you were hot-headed. Qin Yining nodded with a red face. She looked like a well-behaved little kitten who knew she had made a mistake and was begging for her master's forgiveness. Qin Huayuan laughed. You're still a child. Being reckless and impulsive isn't a big mistake. As your father, I also feel that as a person, we cannot blindly endure. We must use both strength and gentleness. I'm not saying that you can't use both hard and soft methods, but you have to be clear about who you're dealing with. For people you can't offend, it might be more appropriate to use both hard and soft methods. Yes. Qin Yining looked at Qin Huayuan with admiration, his eyes sparkling. Father, you were like this just now. When you said that there was a knife hidden in a smile, many people felt guilty and blushed. Father, when can your daughter be like you? I think you're amazing. He didn't make a fuss, he didn't even need to raise his voice. With just a few words, he was able to suppress him. Qin Huayuan was very satisfied when his daughter looked at him with such an admiring gaze. Big Hand couldn't help but pat Qin Yining's head. That's one thing, but more importantly, it's because of my identity. Qin Yining blinked. Her eyelashes suddenly flickered. She understood Qin Huayuan's meaning. Father was telling her that only by standing in a higher position and being relied on by others could one be respected. Moreover, only by standing in a higher position and planning a higher position could one be trusted. Otherwise, one would be considered a rebel and would be criticized. Qin Yining nodded heavily. Your daughter understands. In the future, I'll definitely be filial to old madam. These aren't big matters. I believe you can handle them well. However, there are still many suspicious points about what happened at the Lady Immortal Temple today. Come and tell your father about it. Qin Yining knew that Qin Huayuan would definitely ask, so she didn't hesitate to tell him what had happened. When she talked about Yarou Jishi, Qin Yining didn't tell him the truth. Instead, she used the words she used to deal with Shu Mao. Qin Huayuan didn't doubt such a half-truth. He only said, although young Master Yarou is acquainted with shopkeeper Zhong, I can tell from his eyes and aura that he isn't an ordinary person. It's only right for you to order someone to treat his injuries, but it's also a good idea to keep a respectful distance from him. Qin Yining thought back to everything that had happened since she met Yarou Jishi. She also felt that this person was unfathomable. She obediently said, Father, don't worry. Seeing that his daughter didn't hide anything from him, Qin Huayuan was very satisfied. He nodded and said, do as you see fit. I believe you have your own principles. There's one more thing you have to pay attention to. Father, please instruct me. Right now, Da Ju's documents have been widely distributed in the city twice. The Emperor has concluded that Da Ju's spies have already entered the capital. In addition to what happened at the Lady Immortal Temple today, official Shu believes that Da Ju's people are deliberately creating misunderstandings. If the Emperor finds out, he will be alarmed and uneasy. If the Emperor is uneasy, what do you think he will do? Qin Yining thought for a moment and then said bluntly, the Emperor will definitely think of a way to make peace. He will be even softer towards Da Ju. He will cut down those officials who are loyal to him to appease Da Ju's anger. Qin Huayuan was choked by Qin Yining's straightforward words. Seeing Qin Huayuan's silence, Qin Yining asked with a smile, Father, is what daughter said wrong? Your analysis is very insightful. Qin Huayuan coughed and said, right now, because our family has become in-laws with the Cao family, I have become brother-in-laws with the Emperor. For the time being, we have no worries. It's hard to say about other families. Therefore, if there are any flower appreciation parties held recently, don't go. I will explain this matter to your grandmother later. Yes. Daughter will remember. Also, about your mother. Speaking of the Sun clan, Qin Huayuan frowned and sighed. This time, no matter what the reason is, I am sorry for your mother. You have to take care of her. Qin Yining nodded obediently. Seeing that Qin Huayuan felt guilty towards the Sun clan because of taking a concubine by imperial decree, her heart was filled with mixed feelings. Her father had no choice, and her mother's resentment was actually not wrong. In the end, all of this was because of the Emperor's various actions that their peaceful lives were disrupted. The study was silent. After a long time, Qin Huayuan said, right now, Shihua City and Daeju City have changed their commander-in-chief. I don't know if the war will be eased. Changed their commander-in-chief? Qin Yining said in surprise, isn't that little Wang Yi the commander-in-chief? Pang Zhishi is arrogant and unruly. Before the war, he refused to listen to Emperor Ju's command. In a fit of anger, Emperor Ju stripped him of his position as commander-in-chief. Right now, Daeju's new commander-in-chief is the Minister of War, Lian Shungjie. Qin Huayuan's face revealed a mocking smile. This Lian Shungjie's ability to lead troops is average. He's also lecherous and greedy. He's a person who is used to currying favor. Our spies reported that Pang Zhishi was dissatisfied with being stripped of his position as commander-in-chief. In just 2 days, he had a falling out with Lian Shungjie. In a fit of anger, he rode his horse and left the military camp. Right now, no one knows where he went. Pang Zhishi's tiger army refused to listen to Lian Shengjia's commands. If Diaju continues to cause trouble like this, perhaps our crisis will be resolved. Pang Zhishi. When Qin Yining heard this name, he immediately thought of Yaro Zhishi. However, the two of them happened to have the same surname, so it wasn't strange. Qin Yining didn't think too much about it and only said, "It's naturally good if they have internal strife." Qin Huayuan also said, "Right now, it's up to them to make arrangements. We can also take advantage of this opportunity to take a breather." When Qin Yining heard Qin Huayuan's tone, he knew that on Diaju's side, even if Pang Zhishi wasn't leading the troops, their chances of victory in Dian weren't high. Even if their chances weren't high, Qin Yining still hoped that they would be able to peacefully celebrate the new year. Dian's 35th year of Qinglong, Diaju's 3rd year of Shengchang, arrived in the bland atmosphere of the new year. Qin Yining and the Sun Clan had to observe mourning for the male heir of the Sun Clan. Not only did they dress plainly, but they also didn't participate in any of the family's banquets or performances. Last time, 6th young mistress had been grounded by 2nd madam because she helped Qin Huaining. Because of the new year, her confinement was lifted. However, Qin Huaining was ordered by Qin Huayuan to stay in the Snow Pear courtyard to reflect on her mistakes and copy the classic of filial piety 100 times. For some reason, she didn't immediately finish copying. During the new year, she was exceptionally quiet. The most surprising thing was Qin Huayuan's attitude towards Cao Yuqing. Qin Huayuan had always acted as if he didn't see such a gentle and beautiful woman. He only provided for her with good food and drink and had never visited her courtyard. Qin Huayuan's attitude made the people in the residence treat the Sun Clan with a lot more respect. Except for old madam. Aren't the Sun Clan and Sister Yi observing mourning? Naturally, they can't eat big fish and big meat. The kitchen will just make some vegetarian dishes and send them over. Just do it in the simplest way possible. If it's too delicate, how can it show the filial piety of the Sun Clan? Also, Sister Yi's bird's nest porridge was waived. Don't bird's nest need money? Who gave her the face to observe mourning in such an extravagant manner? Old madam held the brand new brass tobacco pipe and took 2 puffs. She felt that the new tobacco holder wasn't as good as the original one, so she couldn't help but feel angry. Mammy Qin tried to persuade her several times, but she didn't dare to say it too straightforwardly and make old madam suspicious. In the end, she could only have people send dishes like boiled vegetables to Xingning Garden. In Xingning Garden, the Sun Clan held a bowl and looked at the brown rice in the bowl. Then, she looked at the pot of vegetable soup that had turned yellow from being boiled with vegetable leaves. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. What is this? They're bullying me because I don't have parents. No matter how bad I am, I'm still Qin Meng's legitimate wife. Is this how their residence treats Qin Meng's family? The Sun Clan was so angry that they wanted to smash the bowl. Qin Yining's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He saved the pitiful white porcelain bowl. It was unknown how many bowls had been broken in the past few days. Just the broken bowls and plates were worth more than the vegetable soup they ate. Mother, calm down. Do you remember what I said to you a few days ago? Only by suffering the hardest of hardships can one rise above others. Moreover, although they didn't put much effort into the food they sent, the food we ate wasn't bad. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Do you think the vegetarian dishes in Guangyuan building are good? Daughter, should I ask someone to buy more?" The Sun Clan's eyes were full of tears. We're the eldest branch. Every month, there's a fixed amount of allowance. When the head kitchen sent this kind of food box, we ate even worse than the servants. Where did the money go? I sent someone to ask. They said that we have to observe mourning, so we should eat more vegetarian food. They didn't forget to eat and drink well. The eldest branch, concubine Cao, and your father's original 4 concubines also divided our share of the money. Old madam, this is slapping my face. She couldn't hold back her tears and finally fell. Upon seeing this, Qin Yining was helpless. He tried to coax and persuade her. After saying all the persuasive words, the Sun Clan finally stopped crying. Right at this moment, a delicate voice came from the courtyard. Mother Jin's expression was very ugly as she replied, "Eldest madam, concubine Cao, Concubine Hua, Concubine Li, Concubine Chen, Concubine Chen, and Miss Huaning have come to pay their respects to you. Chapter 98. Chapter 98. The milk is the mother. We pay our respects to Madam, and fourth Miss Daughter greets Mother. The ladies' sweet voices were pleasing to the ear, and the scene of them saluting in an orderly manner was very pleasing to the eye. The premise was that he did not look at the smug looks on their faces. Qin Yining smiled and returned the greeting. Then, he sat down in the seat below the Sun Clan. On the other hand, the Sun Clan's face was flushed red. In her heart, she was thinking that she shouldn't care about the plain tea and food on the table, nor should she think about her red eyes from crying. She should only take out the imposing manner of the first wife to deal with these people. But her flushed face still betrayed the embarrassment and humiliation in her heart. Cao Yuqing leisurely sat on a round-backed chair, lazily propping up her body with her elbows. She looked at the crowd with a smile, as if she was waiting to watch a good show. Concubine Hua, Concubine Li, Concubine Chen, and Concubine Chen originally wanted to follow suit and sit down with Concubine Cao. However, when they raised their eyes and inadvertently met Qin Yining's faint smile, they paused. After all, they didn't have an outstanding family background like Cao Yuqing's, so they didn't dare to act recklessly. At this time, Qin Huaning had already walked over to the Sun Clan with a smile. She took the Sun Clan's arm and sat beside her. She explained softly, "Mother, I was grounded by father these days and couldn't come to accompany you. You look a lot thinner." Yes. The members of the Sun Clan were happy to see their daughter. However, when their eyes fell on her silver-red embroidered jacket, they couldn't help but frown. "What are you wearing? Your grandfather and uncle just passed away not long ago. Who are you trying to impress by dressing up like this?" Qin Huaning sneered inwardly when he heard this, but his face was full of fear. He stood up and lowered his head. "Mother, it's the first month of the lunar month now. Daughter wants to walk around outside and is afraid that I will provoke old Madam's displeasure. Naturally, I can only dress up a little. What's more, adoptive mother has just married into the family. I also want to show my filial piety. Foster mother." The members of the Sun Clan didn't understand what she meant. Qin Yining's gaze had already landed on Cao Yuqing, who was lazily eating candied dates. Cao Yuqing sensed Qin Yining's gaze and returned a polite smile, intending to get closer to him. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows slightly and retracted his gaze. It seemed that Qin Huaning had already latched onto Cao Yuqing's thigh. Concubine Chen smiled and said, replying to First Madam, "Miss Huaning and Cao Jejie are very fated. Now old Madam has made the decision to let Miss Huaning recognize Cao Jejie as her adoptive mother. This servant just went to Xiao Garden to observe the ceremony." Concubine Chen was now 35 years old. She had served Qin Huayuan as a maidservant since she was a child. Later, she became a Tongfang maidservant. After the Sun Clan married in, she became a concubine. Madame Chen felt that her relationship with Qin Huayuan was not normal. Even if she sold herself to the family Qin, her status was different, so she did not care about what she said. All these years, she had suspected that the Sun Clan had used sterilization drugs on her. Otherwise, how could she not be pregnant? That's right. This servant saw that Miss Huaning and Cao Jejie are indeed fated. Even their countenance is so similar. Seeing Concubine Chen like this, Concubine Chen also smiled cooperatively. Just now, there was a banquet in Xiao Garden. Everyone said that Miss Huaning and Cao Jejie are somewhat similar. It's just that the sisters were all thinking of First Madam, so they only ate a few bites before specially coming to pay their respects to First Madam. Madame Chen was bought from outside by old Madam in order to carry on the family line for Qin Huayuan. She was 28 years old now, but looked like she was in her early 20s. She was very charming and very moving. With Concubine Chen and Concubine Chen taking the lead, Concubine Hua and Concubine Li also smiled. They did not care about the Sun Clan's ashen complexion and began to congratulate her. Qin Huaning revealed a bashful expression. She pulled on the Sun Clan's sleeve and shook it like a spoiled child, calling out, "Mother." The Sun Clan's vision turned black, and her head buzzed. After a long while, she finally gasped for breath and pointed at Qin Huaining with a trembling finger. Good, good. You ungrateful ingrate. I was blind to have raised you for so many years in vain. As soon as she finished speaking, she threw a slap over. How could Qin Huaining expect that the Sun Clan would not care that Cao Yuqing was also present and actually raise her hand to slap her? She simply didn't have time to dodge and was slapped to the ground. She covered her face and blankly raised her head to look at the Sun Clan. The Sun Clan's tears of humiliation that she had been holding back fell again. She pointed at the people in the room and said, I naturally know what you are planning. Don't forget, I'm still Qin Meng's legitimate wife. The 4 concubines admired the Sun Clan's fierce appearance and laughed mockingly. They had been bullied by the Sun Clan for long enough. Now, they could finally see what it meant by a featherless phoenix is inferior to a chicken. It was truly delightful. Qin Huaining covered her face and sobbed, Mother, please calm down. No matter who I take as my adoptive mother, mother is still my mother. Your daughter will never forget your kindness in raising me. Your daughter just hit it off with adoptive mother. You're acting like this, aren't you embarrassing adoptive mother? Her words caused everyone to look at Cao Yuqing in unison. They saw Cao Yuqing sitting upright in her original position and eating a candied date from her small sunny pouch. Her red lips were slightly pouted, and she looked very beautiful. The concubines seemed to have found their backbone when they saw Cao Yuqing like this. They once again looked contemptuously at the Sun Clan and all of them tried to persuade her, First Madam should also have some grace. That's right. Ding General Manor is gone, but First Madam is still here. Could it be that First Madam's upbringing is gone because Ding General Manor is gone? Now that Dowager Duchess is happy, who is First Madam targeting? Could it be that she's dissatisfied with Dowager Duchess? No, First Madam values filial piety the most. How could she be disrespectful to Dowager Duchess? Then she's targeting older sister Cao? The 4 concubines were all very eloquent. With just a few words, they pulled the 2 people who already had a blood feud to the top. The Sun Clan's eyes were already red from anger. Cao Yuqing was still eating the snacks that she brought with her. In the past, Ding General Manor was powerful, and the Sun Clan was domineering. Ordinary people didn't dare to offend the Sun Clan. Even Dowager Duchess had to be courteous to her in front of the Sun Clan. Qin Huayuan also wasn't enthusiastic about concubines, so these 4 concubines naturally didn't dare to act rashly. Now, it was different from the past. The Sun Clan was now eating simple tea and eating plain food and receiving Dowager Duchess' supercilious looks. Without a backer, they also had to face the powerful Cao Yuqing. How could these concubines not take the opportunity to step on them? The Sun Clan's brain buzzed again, and she was so angry that her whole body trembled. Just as she was about to flare up, Qin Yining spoke first. Her voice wasn't loud, and she said indifferently, All of you, shut up. When the concubines heard Qin Yining's voice, they were all stunned. However, they didn't put the Sun Clan in their eyes, and Qin Yining was even more insignificant now. They continued to persuade them as usual. Qin Yining sneered and raised her voice slightly. Mother Jin, how should a concubine be punished for disrespecting the mistress? Replying to Miss, a concubine is no different from a servant. Naturally, it's up to the mistress to deal with her. When her voice fell, the 4 concubines finally closed their mouths. Concubine Chen looked at Qin Yining mockingly and said, Fourth Miss, don't be too arrogant. First Madam hasn't said anything yet. What does it have to do with you? That's right, Fourth Miss is a young lady. It's best if you don't meddle in Madam's affairs, Concubine Hua also said. Qin Yining remained in her original position and instructed Mother Jin, Go, call over a few sturdy women. Concubine Chen, Concubine Hua, Concubine Li, and Concubine Qian. These 4 haven't served father well for many years. Not only are they unable to provide for the family Qin, but they've also come to Madam's room to cause trouble. Using their status as concubines, they've offended the mistress. The family Qin doesn't want such disobedient servants. Call the slave traders to strip them of their embroidered clothes and gold and silver jewelry. Give each of them a set of coarse cotton-padded jackets and sell them to a place where I can never see them again. Hearing Qin Yining's instructions, Everyone was dumbfounded. The Sun clan finally regained their senses and stared blankly at their daughter. Mother Jin swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Fourth Miss was truly amazing. The concubines were also somewhat surprised. They had originally thought that Qin Yining was a barbarian. She was unruly with her words and liked to hit people. If she was angered this time and made a move, the Sun clan would no longer be in the right. Outsiders would think that the Sun clan's teachings were lacking and that they had raised a legitimate daughter into a poor family. They would also let the master see what kind of wife he had married. No one expected that Qin Yining wouldn't quarrel with them or hit them this time. Instead, she would directly sell them off. Concubine Chen sneered, "What a joke. I've served the master since I was young. Master hasn't even said anything, so what right do you have to sell me off?" "What right do I have?" Qin Yining stood up and smiled at Concubine Chen. "Naturally, it's because I'm the master and you're the servant." He turned around and instructed Mother Jin, "Why aren't you going?" When Mother Jin saw Qin Yining's independent attitude, she was immediately filled with pride and immediately went to call for help. However, Qin Huaining grabbed Qin Yining's sleeve. "Sister Yi, how can you be like this? Father's wife isn't someone you can deal with as you please. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Qin Yining gently brushed away Qin Huaining's hand and smiled warmly at her. "Don't be anxious. I'll deal with you later." Her voice wasn't loud and her attitude was gentle. She didn't seem as fierce as before. However, Qin Huaining felt a chill run down her spine. She was so frightened by her that her heart trembled and she couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Seeing Cao Yuqing eating snacks at the side, Qin Huaining was barely able to suppress the panic in her heart. When Mother Jin sent people over, the news that Xingning Garden was going to sell concubines had been spread by the servants brought by the concubines. Everyone in the Fu knew about it. In Xiao Garden, Old Madam was smiling and talking with second Furen and third Furen. When she heard that such a thing had happened in Xingning Garden, she immediately roared in anger. "Ridiculous, ridiculous. That hen that can't lay eggs. She can't lay an egg herself, yet she wants to sell it to the people around Mengji. Who gave her such guts?" The one who replied was Yu Yi. Yu Yi raised her eyes to look at Mammy Qin and said nervously, replying to Old Madam, "This matter wasn't ordered by eldest Furen, but by fourth young miss." Chapter 99. Old Madam got up angrily and was about to go outside. Second Furen and third Furen looked at each other, and there was a flash of interest in their eyes. Although they couldn't get used to Old Madam's fawning face of currying favor with those in power, second branch and third branch had always been different from the eldest branch. Especially the second branch. Third Old Master was a concubine's son. Old Madam didn't love him, but she had to rely on the third branch's money. But what about the second branch? How much lower was the second legitimate son than the eldest legitimate son? However, Mammy Qin came forward to support Old Madam's arm and gently advised, "Old Madam, don't worry. Let's put on the cloak and wear something warm before going out. Old Madam is a person who is pregnant. If you get blown by the wind and catch a cold, it won't be a joke." Mammy Qin's voice was slow and unhurried. She was wholeheartedly thinking for Old Madam, so Old Madam was naturally willing to listen. While letting Mammy Qin help her put on the cloak and warm hat, Old Madam still cursed, "I think that girl wants to ride on my head. It's only been a few days, and she dares to act like this. What does she want to do in front of Kaosha? Doesn't she think about our family's current difficulties?" Although Mammy Qin wholeheartedly served Old Madam, sometimes she couldn't bear to see Old Madam do those extreme things. However, as a servant, she couldn't persuade her. Seeing Old Madam talking about it, she took the opportunity to persuade her, "Old Madam, don't be angry. Children and grandchildren have their own fortune. You always get angry because of children and grandchildren. How is it good for your health? What's more, look at First Old Master's attitude. When didn't he let fourth young lady do it?" In this servant's opinion, First Old Master loves fourth young lady to the bottom of his heart and nurtures her like a son. With First Old Master's character and talent, What he does and thinks is naturally not something that a crude person like this servant can understand. However, this servant knows that First Old Master has his own reasons for doing things since he was young. After so many years of experience in the officialdom, First Old Master has become more and more outstanding, and his judgment of people has become more and more unique. Since First Old Master has allowed Fourth Young Miss to do it, I think the current situation is what First Old Master wants to see. Qin Huayuan was the old madam's weak spot. After Mammy Qin flattered her, the anger in the old madam's heart had mostly dissipated. Thinking carefully about the meaning of Mammy Qin's words, it made sense. Although Dowager Duchess was angry at Qin Yining for being so overbearing, at this moment, she also felt that perhaps this was Qin Huayuan's secret instruction. She wanted to ask Qin Huayuan for his opinion, but today was the 6th day of the first lunar month, and there was going to be a court meeting in the imperial court. It was uncertain when Qin Huayuan would return. At this point, the Dowager Duchess's attention had been diverted, and her anger had mostly dissipated. Seeing the Dowager Duchess like this, Second Furen and Third Furen couldn't say anything more. They all knew that although the Dowager Duchess was impulsive, Mammy Qin was shrewd. If they said something wrong and Mammy Qin held a grudge, the Dowager Duchess would believe them no matter how much they said behind their backs. When the group of people hurried to Xingning Garden, the sturdy female servants had already helped the 4 yinyangs change their clothes. They looked so beautiful when they came just now, but now they looked so battered and exhausted. The female servants dragged the yinyangs out. Enyang Chen hugged the pillar with tears and snot flowing down her face, and Enyang Hua was lying on the ground with her hands clinging to the base of the platform. The sounds of cursing and crying were endless in the courtyard. Qin Yining was supporting the Sun clan as they stood in front of the main room and looked at the chaotic scene. Qin Huaining was accompanying Cao Yuqing. Seeing the Dowager Duchess come, Qin Yining smiled and supported the Sun clan as they walked down the steps and saluted, "Grandmother is here." Greetings to the Dowager Duchess. The Sun clan and Cao Yuqing also saluted. The Dowager Duchess's face was calm. "I want to be well, but you don't let me be at ease." "How can I be well? Sun clan, what are you doing? It's not even the first month yet, and you dare to cause such a thing. The emperor has always ruled the country with benevolence. In our Dayan dynasty, there's no noble family that would beat or kill a servant. If you want to do it lightly." The Sun clan was angry these days. The Dowager Duchess's indifference and heartlessness had already hurt her heart. Now that she was being reprimanded, with her temperament, how could she be willing to suffer this loss? Who knew that without waiting for her to speak, Qin Yining had already pulled her hand and saluted first. "Dowager Duchess, please calm down. Granddaughter didn't want to beat or kill them. It's just that they didn't serve well and sold them. Moreover, today's matter wasn't mother's idea, but granddaughter's idea." The Dowager Duchess's sharp gaze glared at Qin Yining. Her finger, which was wearing a gold-studded jade ring, pointed at Qin Yining's nose. "Even if you didn't say it, I still wanted to find you. You wild hussy who causes trouble in the family, quickly kneel down." Qin Huaining, who was at the side, couldn't help but curve the corners of his mouth in delight. "Now, let's see who will be the first to be taken care of." Qin Yining didn't care at all. Just as he was about to obey the order to kneel down, his arm was held by a strong hand. When he turned around, he saw Cao Yuqing's beautiful face. "Dowager Duchess, please calm down." Cao Yuqing's face was full of smiles. Her arm firmly held onto Qin Yining, not letting him kneel down. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Qin Yining wouldn't have thought that Cao Yuqing had such great strength. Qin Huaining was also very surprised. He didn't understand why Cao Yuqing was still helping Qin Yining when he had already recognized her as his adoptive mother. "Dowager Duchess, this concubine has overstepped the bounds. The weather is cold and the ground is frozen. Fourth young miss is a girl. How can she endure kneeling on this cold stone ground? If by any chance she becomes ill, Laoi will be distressed." When the Dowager Duchess heard this, she couldn't help but feel happy. Cao Yuqing was born with a bright appearance and never put on the airs of the eldest young miss of the Cao family. She was always polite and obedient to her mother-in-law. Moreover, she always considered everything from Qin Huayuan's perspective and thought for her husband. When she wanted to punish Qin Yining by kneeling, the Sun Clan's biological mother was still angry and didn't stop her. However, Cao Yuqing was able to do this. The Dowager Duchess nodded and said to Qin Yining, "For the sake of your concubine mother Cao, I'll spare you. Tell me, what's going on in this courtyard? Who gave you the courage to sell these concubines?" Qin Yining didn't know what Cao Yuqing wanted to do, but he didn't have time to think. He walked to the Dowager Duchess's side and said in a low voice, "Grandmother, please step aside to talk. Granddaughter has something to say." When the Dowager Duchess saw Qin Yining's serious expression, she followed her to the side. Qin Yining whispered in the Dowager Duchess's ear, "Dowager Duchess, these concubines didn't abide by the rules." Originally, granddaughter thought that Dowager Duchess was benevolent and didn't mind that they didn't have children for many years. Granddaughter thought that they were raising some servants. Granddaughter thought that the rules in this manner couldn't be broken in their hands. Granddaughter didn't want father to be pointed at behind his back and said that he couldn't even find a concubine. Therefore, granddaughter decided to sell them. What's more, now that concubine mother Cao has entered the manor, think about it. Do we still need other concubines in this courtyard? The Dowager Duchess didn't want to hear what Qin Yining said in the beginning. The Dowager Duchess only heard the last sentence. That's right. Why didn't she think of it earlier? When Cao Yuqing entered the manor, she had no choice but to take the place of the Sun Clan. That was the difference between the legitimate wife and the concubines. However, in Qin Huayuan's inner residence, other than the legitimate wife, if there were concubines who were on the same level as Madame Cao, wouldn't that make Madame Cao unhappy? Therefore, Qin Yining wanted to punish these concubines today. Could it be that he was seizing the opportunity to show off and help Qin Huayuan clean up the harem? When the Dowager Duchess thought about it this way, she felt that there was nothing wrong with Qin Yining making a big deal out of this matter and selling the concubines. As the Dowager Duchess, she must be able to distinguish between the priorities. Qin Huayuan originally wasn't enthusiastic about those 4 concubines. His attitude was that they were dispensable. Looking at it this way, it was enough for him to only have 1 wife and 1 concubine. Thinking of this, the Dowager Duchess immediately nodded. She turned around and instructed, "What are you still standing there for? Quickly drive these 4 lowly servants out of the manor. You dare to shout and shout in front of the first madam. Do you think the family Qin is easy to bully? The family Qin raised you and didn't mind that you didn't have children for many years. You actually dare to throw your weight around." Everyone was dumbstruck. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.